Call the meeting of the Board of Adjustment to order, please. Roll call. Mr. Perlman?
William Pearlstein.
Pearlstein, that's wrong. Sorry.
Edie Heron here.
Mark Saunders here.
Jan Conacy here, and Barry Brandt is not, but we have a quorum.
Yes.
And was the meeting in the public notice properly posted, and did we receive any correspondence regarding the case today? Any of the cases today?
I don't have my paperwork with me, but I can verify that the agenda was posted in a timely fashion. It was also amended. And also the public notice was sent out and published in Cape Gazette and Delaware State News in a timely fashion. Signage was posted on the property, and also mailings were sent out to property owners within 200 feet.
Thank you. We have 2 sets of minutes to approve today. Does anyone want to make a motion on?
I move that we approve the January 23rd minutes as presented by Ann.
Okay.
Seconded.
Is any corrections or additions
On the January 23rd.
on the January 23rd one?
Literally just a typo on the top of page 2, third line, the word address is misspelled. That's literally a typo.
What's the word?
Address,
Address?
yeah.
Okay.
Would you just, Ann, would you like Bill to give you his notes when he's,
No, I haven't.
okay,
You got it?
all right,
Okay.
Thanks.
Anything else? Then you can call the question.
okay. Call the question.
All in favor?
All in
signify by
favor, saying aye.
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 Any opposed?
Any opposed? No, okay. Motion is passed.
Right.
The next date of minutes is, what's the next date? I don't have the minutes right in front of me.
November 28th.
Okay, November 28th. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
It's not in, okay. Second? Mark?
Second here.
Oh.
I second.
Okay. Any corrections or additions to the minutes?
Yes. Under the verification, the third line, the dates should be November 22nd, 2022,
22, right.
not 23, twice. On page 3, the full paragraph that starts Mark Saunders, the maybe spell check changed quick check, which should be K. Okay, fine. That's the advantage of a law degree, I guess. KWIK dash capital C for check. So that's, that occurs 1, 2, 3, 4 times, and in that paragraph.
Yeah, find and replace, we'll find that. In Word.
So it's KWIK, then the word check. That's all I had on corrections.
Anybody else have any additions or corrections? Okay. I'm calling the question.
So the question is, can we adopt the minutes with the changes suggested by Mr. Pearlstein? All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes approved as corrected. Thank you. Ann, is there any old business?
What about the August minutes?
We're going to hold off on those. I'm the only one who was on the board then, and I'd like to get Barry and I both to look at them. And then,
He had sent me an email earlier saying he was okay with them.
okay, I didn't get the email, though. He must have just sent it to you, so I just prefer a hold off.
Okay.
Thanks. Is there any old business? Okay. New business.
Correspondence?
Oh, we have some correspondence?
Well, I had a question about the correspondence.
Okay.
We received some as late as last night, and I'm wondering, aren't they supposed to be in 7 days ahead of time to be validated?
I'm not sure. All right, actually, I don't need to push the button. I'm not sure that our rules are not applied generally to prohibit or forbid the consideration of correspondence that comes in
was my
later than
question.
that,
Thank
because
you.
a person could come to the meeting and testify in person. I think the rule you're referring to is ideally for an applicant to get all their materials in so that they can be sorted and distributed to the members, so the members have ample time to consider them.
I understand. Thank you.
Typically, when correspondence comes in, I embed into the agenda, but because it came in over the weekend, I cannot embed over the weekends prior to the meeting. So any correspondence that you have with your packet today will be embedded after this meeting.
Okay, so the amended agenda indicates that we received a number of items
Since the original posting.
since the
Right.
original posting, but we also have received other correspondence since
I
then.
see, I see two, one from McDaniel and one from Lynham. But there were actually two from Lynham, because one was directly to us from Lynham, and the other one was to Robertson, who was then forwarding to us. Is that correct, Ann?
Yes.
Yes, so we have two from Lynham. It's essentially the same letter, although there's a slight difference in verbiage. But there are two additional people.
And just for the record, they apply to which of the applications?
40 Park.
40 Park.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I just want to check with everyone. Has everyone read all the correspondence related to any of the cases that we're going to be hearing today?
Yes, I've read everything more than
Okay,
once.
thank you. Tand you.
Okay, so the first item of business is the extension, so you
Right.
don't need to do this.
Okay, all right.
There's also a piece of correspondence from a Kathy McDaniel of Open LLC. It's attached to your packet,
Yes.
and that one is for 40 Park Avenue.
So everyone's seen that as well, right? Okay.
Ann forwarded all three things to us
Yes, yeah, we have them as well.
at quite an amazing time of day,
I know.
or
I
morning.
know.
1:19 a.m. I saw. Goodness, Ann.
Somebody has trouble sleeping at night.
Or a 24/7 job.
Yeah, well, both. The first case that we're going to hear today is a request for an extension of the variance that the Board of Adjustment granted to the Bellhaven Hotel. And they, for various and sundry reasons, it hasn't started yet, the variance will run out. And they've come to us to ask for a continuance of the variance. Matt, do you have anything? Does the city have any comments?
We can just mention that the variance, as we understand it, would expire April 26 under the current scenario. So the commissioners are doing a few things as well to amend the city ordinances, because this is kind of a code issue that could relate to other future projects. So that activity is going on as well, but this additional 3 months of time gives a little bit of breathing room to allow those other efforts to occur.
Okay, thank you, Glenn. Hal, do you have anything?
You can sit down if you
Oh,
like.
wait a minute.
No, he doesn't get sworn.
You don't get sworn in?
He
Okay,
doesn't.
you don't get sworn in, okay. Only relay people.
This is a request for a 90-day extension. Mr. Papajohn is with me right now. In the course of events, we had the original hearing.
Can you pull the microphone closer?
Sure.
And I need everybody up at the dais to be able to do the same thing, because the recording of it, the people that are listening are not hearing this conversation as well. You may be able to hear yourselves really good, but other people are having problems hearing this.
Yeah, there's some ambient noise tonight or this afternoon, that might be interfering with it, but we'll do our best.
Okay. For the record, my name is Hal Dukes from the law firm of Tunnell and Raysor, and I'm here representing the Papajohn family. And we're revisiting the case number 0123-01, which was the Bellhaven Hotel at number 2 Rehoboth Avenue. The case was finalized in November, the 22nd of 2021. Then it went on, we had Bunky Marquette went to Superior Court and challenged the board's ruling. Superior Court upheld the Board of Adjustment, and that finalization of that ruling expired on October the 24th, 2022. So we would, our 6-month time ran then, and of course it runs out in April. And we're asking for a 90-day extension while we're pulling things together. We're before the board for, do you remember what date it is? It's April,
April 14th?
I think it's April 14th. That is the Planning Commission.
Oh, okay.
And we've had our plans in since December, but for various reasons, they haven't been able to put us on the schedule. So in essence, the Planning Commission would wipe out the variance. And in that regard, we're asking for a 90-day extension.
Do any of the members have any questions?
I do. Matt and Glenn, is there any reason that we should not grant this extension from the city's perspective?
From the city's perspective, this is a issue that's inherent in the code now, and we've recognized it. There's, for a simple residential project where you're adding on to a deck or something and you've gotten a variance for it, 6 months is plenty of time to pull a building permit. But in this instance, by no fault of their own, the city's code does not allow for enough time to get through the site plan review process and also have your variance not expire. So from our perspective, this is in everybody's best interest to grant it.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
And the city's code indicates that the variances that we grant expire after 6 months and are subject to one extension of up to 3 months. And I think as the city's indicated, that section is under review, but you have the authority at this point to grant a 30-day extension. Excuse me,
90 days.
90-day extension, 3-month extension, yes.
Does anybody else have any questions? Nobody here to speak on this? Okay, I'll call for a motion.
That is the case, right? No one is here to speak on this application.
90
Very
that's
good.
correct.
Then I move that we extend the variance for another 90 days, or for 90 days.
I second.
Call for a vote.
Aye.
Mark?
Aye. Yes.
Aye?
Aye.
Oh, do we need to say why?
No.
For a quick check? No, okay.
Okay.
Unanimous.
Unanimous?
Yes.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
I was going to say, this is the shortest one you've ever had, right?
Have a nice afternoon.
Um,
Okay.
We have, our next case is 111 Park Avenue. Oh, sorry, Hal, that's you too.
Okay.
If anyone else is going to speak, they need to be sworn in. And our attorney, are you going to be speaking also?
Yes. Yeah, we'll get to him. I'll
Oh,
get to him.
okay. All right, do you want me to go over the criteria now?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
All right. Okay, I'm just going to go through some of the criteria that we use when making decisions, and it will apply to this case and the next one too. Under Delaware law, an applicant for an area variance must prove that the requirements create an exceptional practical difficulty. To determine whether an exceptional practical difficulty exists, the board must weigh the following 4 factors: the nature of the zone where the property lies, the character and the use of the immediate vicinity, whether removal of the restriction on the applicant's property would seriously affect the neighboring properties and their uses, and whether failure to remove the restriction would create an exceptional practical difficulty for the owner in relation to the owner's efforts to make normal improvements to the property. This standard is satisfied only when the difficulties alleged by the owner are practical rather than theoretical and exceptional rather than routine. Everyone who chooses to speak today will be required to give their testimony under oath, and Mr. Townsend, our attorney, will administer the oath. We don't transcribe these hearings, so if a transcript of this hearing is ever required, the court reporter will have to work from the tape recordings of the meetings, which is why it's really important for all of us to speak into the microphones. And that's about it. And our rules require that the owners of properties within 200 feet in question get notice of the variance request. They have. And the Board of I know that, was a Board of Adjustment sign displayed?
Yes.
Yes, I
I
walk by
saw it.
there all the time, so I see it.
So I always go to the properties.
Okay. Do you have any remarks that you'd like to make, Matt or Glenn?
He usually reads the building inspector's report.
Right, well, that's what I'm,
Right.
Right. Thank you. Good afternoon, board members and members of the public and city staff. Before you today is 0123-01 111 Park Street. The applicant is Philip Patterson Jr. Of 1109 Brandon Lane, Wilmington, Delaware 19807. He is the owner. Today's subject is the applicant is seeking relief from the following: 270-24 building setback lines and 270-50B extension of non-conforming structures. The applicant, Philip Patterson Jr., is seeking variances to 270-24 building setback lines and 270-50B extension of non-conforming structures to allow an increase in height of 16 inches to an existing covered entryway. The property is located at 111 Park Street, Rehoboth Beach, Delaware 19971, known as The Property, and is situated in the R1 residential district. The property is listed in Sussex County records as tax map number 334-14.13-159.01. The parcel is triangular in shape and approximately 5,420 square feet. Application background information. Department of Building and Licensing records relating to the property date back to September 19th, 1957. Several applications for permits were approved throughout the years. Prior applications associated with the property indicate that a portion of the single-family residential structure on the property encroaches over and onto the right-of-way of Park Avenue. On February 17th, 2017, the city and the previous owners of the property executed a license agreement allowing for the retention of the encroachment, the license agreement. The license agreement did not allow any increase to the encroachment without express written consent from the city. Since that time, Mr. Patterson purchased the property. Recently, Mr. Patterson requested an amendment to the license agreement to allow for the extension of the encroaching entryway by 16 inches vertically into the air rights, but would not change the footprint of the encroachment. On January 20th, 2023, the Board of Commissioners voted to adopt the amendment to the license agreement for the property. Mr. Patterson now seeks variances to allow for the height increase within the setback area detailed in the amendment to the license agreement. Variance is requested. The applicant is seeking relief from the following ordinances. 270-24, building setback lines. Each story or part of a building shall be set back from the street line so as not to project beyond the building setback line prescribed in the following table. And I've dumbed, if you will, the table down to just show you the R1. It is required to be 15 feet, and I did not include the footnotes, which does not pertain. A document submitted by the applicant labeled as 6 and circled depicting the current site plan shows the building to be constructed over the property line through previously applied for and approved building permits. 270-50B, extension of non-conforming structures. B, any legal non-conforming structure devoted to a conforming use may be extended, provided that such extension conforms to the applicable dimensional requirements of the zoning district in which the legal non-conforming structure is located. The portion of the existing structure proposed to be raised is existing non-conforming because that portion of the building was constructed to a code provision that no longer allows this encroachment. The current footprint extends beyond the property boundaries and encroaches over and onto the right-of-way of Park Avenue. My conclusion is the proposed renovations to increase the height of the covered entryway are to an area that encroaches the required front yard setback as well as the property line. The entry is proposed to be increased in height by 16 inches to allow the current owner a better means of unrestricted access. Because the construction is existing non-conforming and is located beyond the property boundaries, a variance is required for the proposed construction. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for the building inspector?
I do have a couple, and I may want to have a few more. How did they get the building permit in 2022 without the variance?
The
How
building,
did Mr. Patterson receive that?
the building permit that was applied for it was not for that area. It was for a different situation.
Oh, I see. And I noticed throughout this, all the documentation for this case, there are a number of places that it's called Park Street. It's Park Avenue, and I mean, that was written by Mr. Patterson. Some of it was written by the city. I don't know if that changes anything and that we have to be very correct, because there is no Park Street that I know of, but it's certainly Park Avenue.
I'm actually pulling up my zoning map right now, if you'll allow me a moment.
Well, it's so crazy because it's UVWX on some of the lots. And
You are correct. It should be Park Avenue.
yes, and there are several places, not just one. And I don't know if we need to bring those to attention. Do we?
I don't think
Do we,
that's-
Fred?
I mean, I think it does some good to acknowledge them, but I don't think it takes us off the rails for today's business.
Okay. Another thing that I noticed in the briefing is that there were a couple of references to the previous owner and the trusteeship, and Carol is misspelled over and over. The trustee is Carole, and it's been in the materials, we keep getting Carol, Carol. For instance, if you look at from the Tunnell and Raysor January 12, 2023, the top of the second page, the existing license agreement approved, blah, 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 between Carol Ann Calhoun, trustee, and the Carol Ann Calhoun Revocable Trust. Carol is misspelled there. So again, that's the improper name of that trust. I don't know if it matters, but I wanted to be sure that if we need to correct something, that we have the correct name of the individuals and this trust that we're dealing with.
So that's just background information in my
Okay.
estimation. I don't think it needs
Okay.
to be.
And the other thing that I noticed was in the NT Builders information, and again, maybe I should bring this up. I never know when exactly to bring this up. Over and over again, somebody put adjoining as ADJOING, misspelling adjoining over and over again. And I don't know how much we have to correct to make it an exact document, or we just say, oh, well, there's human error and everything, and we let it go. I just wanted to make sure that we were aware at least, and if we needed to correct something, that we did that at early on rather than later in this hearing.
Yeah, thanks for raising all that. I think that the relevant document, though, is going to be the written decision of the
Okay,
board that'll have all
okay.
those items corrected, since I know Mr. Townsend does exceptional work.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Glenn, for the clarification. That's all that I have at this point. I may have other questions later.
Does anybody else have any questions?
Jan, I just want to note that when Mr. Patterson did stand up, he is 6 foot tall. And the problem here, of course, is this doorway is 5.5 foot. Am I correct? I noticed in your.
I am not Mr. Patterson.
You're not, all right, well, you are
I am
6 foot
not.
tall.
No.
And I
No,
can
he
see.
isn't. He's not.
Well
He
over
isn't.
6 foot.
So- Right, so that is, the crux of the problem, it seems that the doorway is only 5.5 foot, is that correct?
Yeah, when he went for his,
Well, wait.
Well, he
Wait a
can't-
minute.
He has to be sworn in.
I'm sorry, I
Okay,
thought you
wait,
missed that.
Just wait 1 second.
We're
For
talking about
Glenn
the
or
building
just for
inspector.
Glenn and Matt?
Okay, well, then, is it correct that the doorway is only 5.5 foot as it exists?
I believe that's correct.
Yeah, that was my question, is what exactly is the size of the existing door, and what is a standard door? I would like to know those two measurements before we move very far.
Yeah, sure. I can tell you that the standard door is a 6'8", typically, for residential construction.
Okay,
And I believe you are correct. It's a little over 5 feet.
that was.
I read that in one of the.
Yes.
Right.
Yep. From the provided documentation, I would agree that it does not qualify as a normal door, if you
Okay,
will.
but you haven't measured it. It was.
I have
This
not.
is just from the documentation.
It is known to be shorter than a
Okay, so it's
normal-
known to be non-standard and in the shorter range of that.
Correct.
Thank you. That was one of my questions for later.
Okay.
That was my only
Anybody,
question.
any other questions? Okay. Mr. Dukes, do you have any?
For the record, my name is Hal Dukes. I'm from the law firm of Tunnell and Raysor, and I represent Mr. Philip Patterson. We have tried to be as accurate as we can in all our correspondence and their exhibits, and you'll see that the only question before us today is a request to increase this door from 5 foot 6 inches to 6 foot 8. The pattern, if you can see from the history of this house, it's well over 100 years old. When this house was built, there's horse and buggies going down the street, and I guess they didn't measure the streets very well in those days, so there we are. Mr. Patterson had an opportunity to tear the house down and build a new house. He is a fan of history, and he'd like to keep the house exactly the way it is. There's been nothing changing on the footprint of this house. The big thing is there is a air rights, and the town has said that there has to be an increase in air rights. We've had 4 hearings on this matter so far, and this is the last one for the air rights. They're very precious, I guess, in this case. But in the course of events, we are fortunate enough to have the builder here, and I'd like him to relate to exactly what he's going to do there on the site and why he needs to bring it into code compliance.
Okay, Mr. Townsend will swear him in then.
Sir, could we have your name and address for the record?
My name's Nathan Taylor. Address is 110 Thomas Landing Road, Townsend, Delaware.
Sir, do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you can continue.
Okay, so what we're asking for is there is a rooftop over top of this doorway. It's the main entryway they use in and out of the house 99% of the time. The roof is extremely low, and which causes the main door into the house to be even shorter. We can't get that clearance that we need because the roof system is so low. So what we're proposing is we just take that roof structure and raise it up to the structure behind it. We have this picture here that was issued, it's circled. You can see the small white triangle, that's the roof structure we're talking about. We're just talking about bringing it up to level with the next roof structure above it, 16 inches. That's
Can I ask you to clarify? From everything that I read, this door is called the side door, not the front door, because the front door,
Main, I
door.
said it's a main door they use. I didn't say it was
because
the
the
front door.
documentation seems to indicate side door. I just want to make sure that we're using the right terminology. I know which one
Yeah, I
it
mean, you
is.
could call it side door, that's fine. I mean, the front door is located on.
Fourth.
On
Yeah,
Third
on
Street.
Fourth, correct. So, or Third, I believe it's Third. It's Third.
Third? Oh,
It's
Yeah.
Third Street.
It's Third Street and Park.
Fourth, okay.
So they're on that corner. But the front door is located to the face of Third. And then this door is, on the east side of the property, more or less.
Yeah, where the
So-
driveway is, I think.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So that's the door they use most of the time because that's where the driveway is. That's where they park. That's where they come in and out from going up to the beach and walking around. That's the main entry they use 99% of the time. So with Mr. Patterson being taller than me, the doorway does become a problem. It is small on the standards of height for any doorway, up and down building code restrictions. It would not pass standard code restrictions right now. So all we're proposing is we raise the roof system up 16 inches so we can fit a regular height door in. That's all we're asking for. We're not encroaching out sideways or anything like that. We're just trying to go vertical. That's all.
Can you clarify something for me?
Sure.
The entire house, except for that one entry, is covered with Tyvek, so I assume it's in the state of construction. There's a sale pending sign from Lingo on the side, so I'm not sure. Maybe you can tell me. It doesn't sound like maybe Mr. Patterson is going to be affected by the height of the door.
That's nostalgic purposes. That sign was kept from when they purchased the property. He is not selling that property.
It's a question.
Yeah, no,
It's
that's
not-
fine.
It's not a
No.
condemnation or a
No,
judgment, it's a
no.
question.
We were surprised when we found the sign there, when we tore off the back section, it was just there. He kept it for, like I said, just a memory, I guess. Yeah, or the sale company left it and he didn't know what to do with it.
Because the only hardship that Mr. Patterson mentioned in his application was the fact that he's a tall gentleman and it's an uncomfortable site for him to enter and leave the property.
Right, also that it does not meet standard code. I believe that was listed in there too. The door height does not meet standard code. We're trying to bring everything up to meet standard code.
And I might also add, it does not meet the insurance requirements for his regular house insurance.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments? No? Okay, all right. I'll call for a motion, please.
So,
Wait, do I not?
So, I guess by show of hands, is there anyone here who wishes to be heard on this application in the public? I'll come up and speak. Okay. And then, Ann, while this gentleman's coming up, do we have anyone, can people participate virtually here? I forget, they
No,
cannot.
no, they
Okay,
cannot.
gotcha.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michael Ramey. I live at 110 Park Avenue, directly across the street.
Mr. Ramey, do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony given in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the
I
truth?
do. My living room window looks directly onto the entrance that is in the subject matter here. So I think I can speak pretty comfortably for most of my neighbors on the block that we would all support this variance. As Mr. Dukes had mentioned, this house was over 100 years old. They wanted to preserve it. It's an oversized lot. I think most buyers would have torn it down and built a large home and taken down the trees. So, you know, I'm over 6 feet tall. I went in that house when it was on the market. It's tight. So I just wanted to voice my support for the adjustment variance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No questions for him.
Does anybody else want to speak on this application?
Does Matt and do you folks have anything else to add?
I believe we're good, thank you.
Then I move that we grant the variance.
Second.
So now
Okay.
you can ask for further deliberations.
Any further deliberations? No one? Okay, then I'll call for a vote.
And
Yes.
we will want reasoning.
We have to say reasons.
Reasoning, yeah.
I would vote yes,
Well,
because,
wait a minute, Edie made the motion, so let's,
I'm sorry.
Edie.
I'm making the motion because I think that the primary reason for me under area variance, under criteria 4, does the request stem from a unique configuration of the lot that cannot be applied generally to other lots, such as narrowness, shallowness, et cetera. I think that's absolutely true in this case, and that's my overwhelming reason why I think this variance should be granted.
And
I second, I agree. I believe we met all the 4 quick check factors, influenced by the fact that you're not talking about any further encroachment on city property, but simply going up. And frankly, from a fire and safety hazard, I think having an undersized door is frankly ill-advised for all of us in the city. If somebody had to get out in the dark from a fire, you know, it sounds like almost all of us would hit our heads.
Almost.
and I agree with what Edie and Bill said. And in addition, I'm 6 foot myself, so I sympathize. So I would vote yes.
And I also vote yes, for the same reasons. Motion has passed.
You can declare that the motion is passed by a vote of.
Okay, the motion has passed by a vote of 4-0.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to move to our next case, case number 3, 40 Park Avenue. Matt, do you want to provide the building inspector's report?
Certainly, thank you, Chair. The case number for this is 0223-02. This is for 40 Park Avenue and not Park Street. This is the estate of Ruth Wagner, Mark Wagner, and Catherine Wagner Palmer, trustees, 1734 Independence Avenue Southeast, Washington, D.C., 20003. The owners are the same. The applicant seeks relief from the following: 27026 side yards and 27044 accessory buildings. The applicant is seeking a variance to 27026 side yards and either a variance to 27044 accessory buildings or a determination that the existing accessory structure is legally non-conforming. The purpose of the application is to allow for the relocation of an existing primary structure. The property is located at 40 Park Avenue, Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, 19971, and is situated in the R1 Residential District. The property is listed in Sussex County records as tax map number 334-14.13-250. The property is a 100 by 100 foot lot with an existing primary structure and an existing accessory structure. Background information. According to documents submitted by the applicant, the two-story single-family dwelling was constructed in 1926. The applicant seeks to relocate and modify the existing structure such that the dwelling can be located on a theoretical 50 foot by 100 foot parcel. Upon the completion of the relocating the structure, the applicant intends to seek to partition the parcel to create two 50 foot by 100 foot parcels. The survey provided by the applicant identifies the accessory structure as existing carriage house. The city is in receipt of a survey dated and recorded 07/18/2008, identifying the accessory structure as a one-car garage. A site visit revealed that at some point a portion of the one-car garage had been converted into a shower stall complete with a hot water heater. No permits issued or inspections were held for the conversion of that area. Pictures in the survey on record are included. Variance is requested. The applicant is seeking relief from the following provisions: 27026 side yards. 2 side yards shall be provided on every lot as prescribed in the following table. And again, the majority of the table has been redacted just to include what we're speaking to here today is an R1 with a minimum width of 6 feet and a minimum aggregate of 16 feet. The proposed relocation of the existing structure would apparently create a side setback encroachment of 0.7 feet, 8.4 inches, over 8 inches, over the required yard setback in violation of 27026. Accessory buildings and accessory buildings shall be detached from the main building on the lot and shall be not less than 10 feet to the rear of the front line of the main building. An accessory building may encroach upon one side yard and the rear yard such that the accessory building shall be no closer than 4 feet to the side and rear lot lines. Excuse me. The accessory building's use was substantially modified without a permit. Internal alterations to a non-conforming structure require a special exception when the existing non-conforming use is being changed to a different non-conforming use. 27049, in this case, no such special exception was secured in connection with the changing the use of the non-conforming accessory garage structure. Upon relocation of the main dwelling, the related accessory structure would be relocated beyond the 4-foot allowable side and rear yard setback encroachment for accessory structures. Allowing the accessory structure to remain in the current location would create a nonconformity and therefore would require a variance. It has been noted that the use has been modified to include a shower area complete with separate water heater. For the allowable use of the garage/limited structure to remain, all non-permitted habitable areas should be removed. My conclusion is that the proposed relocation of the existing primary structure would violate side setback requirements under 27026 by 0.7 feet. Because the use of the accessory structure was substantially modified without permission, allowing the accessory structure to remain in the current location upon relocation of the main dwelling would create a nonconformity and therefore would require a variance.
Glenn, do you have anything to add?
I don't, Madam Chair.
Does anyone?
Yeah, I have a question. I want to understand on the accessory structure, if the water heater and other alterations were removed so that it was back to the way the city understood the structure was, would they still need a variance as to the accessory structure?
They would not. The placement would meet the code.
Okay.
Actually, excuse me.
No.
I believe
that's
they
not
are
true.
closer in the rear They would still have to,
But
yeah, they would still have to relocate the existing carriage house that's listed on their survey,
what is that?
or secure a variance. Currently, they're showing 1.6 feet to the rear property line, and we would require a minimum of 4 feet.
Okay, but that's been there for a long time, correct?
It has been.
So is it the city's view that that was in violation of the code for many, many years, irrespective of the change in use? If it were a one-car garage,
I would have to look into when the code was modified to allow the up to 4-foot encroachment. But I have records dating back, way probably the 20s or 30s for this house, that show that as part of the original construction. So I believe that at that time, it was allowed to be built at that location.
so if we assume that, is the issue vis-à-vis the second request, the variance on the accessory building, arise from the fact that without code approval, they've added a shower and a hot water heater?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Could I just follow up on that line of questioning? In actuality, what they're trying to do is create 2 separate lots now, correct?
I believe that is the applicant's
Well,
desire.
that's what it says, So by creating a new lot, then it has to come up to code.
Correct.
You can't partition a non-conforming lot. So in order to partition that lot, the accessory structure either has to be removed or moved 4 feet forward, and then it counts in the gross floor area of whatever they chose to build on that site.
And doesn't it have to be moved farther if it's going to be habitable? If it's just a shed?
Well, I hope it's not habitable. I don't.
No, well, I mean, that it's used for some other purpose.
Well, I don't know, because it never occurred to me that you would want to
You've got
live there.
2.4 feet, correct?
Yes, but
Yeah,
then
we're
We
getting
need to
to
go
We're
one at a
here.
time, and let's try and work with questions and
Yeah, okay.
answers.
can I follow up on that? They're not asking for the partition.
That's correct.
Not-
They
not-
can't,
not
they're not
asking
allowed
us.
to.
No, I'm saying that, but they're not. So
That's
the
planning commission, that's not the board.
Yeah,
that
so
does
the
it. That's separate.
issue on whether they need to, in fact, conform in order to get a permission and to get a partition is not before us.
I can't answer for Vince. I would assume that if I wanted to partition, if I had 100 by 100 and I wanted to partition it, that I would either want to remove any illegal structure or non-conforming structure, or get a variance before I went to the planning commission. That's what I would assume.
So I think what we're doing here is we're identifying some questions that we want the applicant to address, and we may want to hear more from the city on.
Okay.
So we're certainly in no position yet to judge the application based on some of these questions we have. We're going to get answers.
Can I ask you
Okay.
a question of the building inspector, though?
Yes, you may.
You've seen this, the proposed dwelling.
Yes.
Am I correct that the dotted line is the building allowable plan, the allowable space? So the dotted line shows just a slight bit of overage at this point. So all we're talking about is that little 14-foot section. It said 20 foot in the documents, but it appears here on my copy to only be 14 feet.
That is correct. It would be the encroachment of the 14-foot area. If we're looking at the document, let's just call north straight up the
Can you tell
page.
me what is on the inside of that room?
I do not have records to indicate what that area
Ask
is.
when the time comes up.
Absolutely.
So are you talking about the house or the garage?
Talking about the house.
Okay, all right, then can I,
Go ahead.
there's no there's no FAR numbers on here for the house or the accessory building.
That's correct.
Shouldn't we be, maybe I could just ask you about process then. So if we, say we grant a variance for the side yard setback, then it becomes, having learned that variances travel with property, and no matter what you do, I mean, it's a big surprise to me. But so that means then that we would give them the variance, and whatever they do there is up to you. So we have no control after that to say, well, we're giving you a variance to turn this historic house sideways because we feel like we'd like to maintain the house. But they don't have to do that. They can tear down the house and build a new house.
But I would think, I'll answer that you all have the ability to condition it on this house being rotated.
Well, that's what that was I was going to
Well,
ask.
and we
I
don't
was
have an
going to ask
objection to
Matt.
that. I mean, that's sort of implied. in
And then
this.
the other thing is,
Raises the time frame concerns that we heard.
you're right,
the
Well,
earlier
that's
right.
right,
Yeah,
that's
we
right.
talked. And then the other question I have then, Matt, is after they cut off the porch, then does it come down to 3,000 square feet?
The only way I can answer that question is to say that all building permits would be reviewed according to our zoning
Okay,
code.
all right.
So that they would have to meet the requirements if they're coming forward to ask for a side setback encroachment. That's what we're talking about. Regardless of the allowable side setback encroachment, they would still have to meet the remainder of 270.
Okay, so that if we say that the side encroachment, then, and, to preserve this historic house, but then it turns out that what's sitting on the lot right now is, I'm making up a number, 4,000 square feet, what happens then? Maybe Glenn needs to answer that. Or,
Sure. I mean, if the proposal, presuming you grant the variance, and I don't. know
I'm
if
just
that's gonna
making
happen or
this
not,
stuff up
right.
because I want to find out.
If the applicant then comes in with a building permit application, and it shows, for example, that what's proposed does not satisfy the FAR, they would still have to do something different, perhaps come back and ask for another variance to satisfy the floor area ratio. The
Okay.
only thing under consideration is a side yard setback encroachment.
Okay, okay, that's all I wanted to know. You would not approve it?
Right.
Okay.
I was may I?
Yeah,
is it my
I'm
turn? Yeah, I had a couple of questions also, and I was wondering if we could look at this variance in two pieces, because there are two pieces.
Well, there are two pieces.
And I was hoping that we might begin our discussion with the house and then move to the accessory building, but we can do what, of course, we've already started on both areas.
Well, at some point, I'd like to make my presentation and explain it all.
You can do it.
But I'd like to verify with Matt, and it was a point I believe that has just been made by Mark. So the 0.7 feet, the 8.4 inches is only on the 14 running feet.
You are
Is that
correct.
According to this drawing, is that correct?
According to the survey presented by the applicant, that's correct.
Right. And my question is, and maybe this has been partly answered also, if the variance for this particular piece, the side yard variance, is granted by this board, what happens if the house structure is not deemed to be relocatable? Because we know that with an older home, there could be structural issues that nobody knows yet that are intrinsic to the building, that somebody, even if they wanted to move it, they decide, gee, I'd like to do this, and they find out when they go to do it, it's just too compromised. So what happens then? Is it what happens exactly what Glenn just said, is that they come back and start over, or what happens if that happens?
I would say you can certainly stipulate that in your decision if you wanted to, that this only pertains to the existing relocation of the existing structure. And if they came before me for a new building application, obviously I don't believe the variance would then apply to that application, but that's something that you could put in your decision.
I see.
And we would agree with that. I mean, if it doesn't work, this old house is going to get torn down. You're going to get two new houses that look like every other house in town, and it would comply.
Those were my questions on that piece, that half of the variance request.
I just have a quick question, based on one we did on State Road. When we grant a variance, when we grant a variance, and even though it's listed here as only 14 feet, 7 inches, or whatever, that part of the house, we were told that the variance goes for the whole property. So can you make your stipulation that it only be for that on the side of the house there? Fred, can you do that?
It depends on the
I didn't
applicant.
know who to ask,
Yeah,
though.
it depends on the manner in which the application is raised. And in the other case, there was a house that was under construction, And in this case, we're talking about relocating a home. So I don't think, it doesn't sound like you're going to have any pushback from the applicant, who is perfectly willing to accept a condition that the variance not be applied to any new redevelopment of the property, but to just the relocation
that
of the
they've
current
made.
house. And if the house can't be relocated for building code reasons or any other reason in the location they'd like to, then the variance is going to expire or be not applicable to their other future plans.
Okay. All right, does anyone have any questions for Matt or Glenn? Vince? We saved the best for last.
Okay, well, I am still Vince Robertson with Parkowski, Yerk, and Swayze. I am here on behalf of the relocation of the house at 40 Park Avenue, like it says on the screen. I'm here with Mark Wagner, who is one of the owners. His wife, Sonia, is actually tuning in from Paris because she's there on work, so that's a first for me. I don't know that I've been in a hearing that's been so internationally attended, but she is watching online. And then Catherine Palmer, who is Mark's sister. She is also the owner, one of the owners of this 100 by 100 foot lot. Both Mark and Catherine are children of Ruth Wagner. As I said, they own the 100 by 100 foot lot. And then Kelsey Hamilton is here from Boardwalk Builders. She may just confirm that she has studied the house and that it is feasibly doable to move it and spin it 90 degrees like we talked about. So a bit of background. The house sits on a 100 by 100 foot lot. Oops, I gotta use the right button. So that is the front door of the house, and there's some information about it. It was built in 1926. It is registered with the Rehoboth Beach Historical Society. You can see the plaque to the left of the front door on that picture. I do recognize that doesn't really carry with it any significant historical preservation significance. On the other hand, having gone through this, or anybody else that has, I know that they actually research the land titles and the building records before they'll give you that plaque. They don't just hand them out. And so while there's not any preservation connections tied to that plaque, the fact that the Historical Society gave that to the Wagners confirms its age. It was, as it says on here, it was originally used as a hunting lodge by the Clyde family. There's only been 2 owners of this home. It was built in 1926 by the Clyde family, and then it was purchased by Mark and Catherine's mother and father in 1970. It's been in their home for more than 50 years. In 2019, Ruth Wagner, who was the surviving parent, passed away, leaving the property to Mark and Catherine. And they do not want to sell the property. As I think we all know in Rehoboth, if they sold it as is on a 100 by 100 lot, it would get torn down. Somebody would tear it down, partition it into 250 by 100 lots, and we'd get some, well, I don't want to say in case anybody lives in one of the new houses, but they look like just about every other house in Rehoboth anymore because people just build them, to meet the max FAR. Mark, who lives in D.C. and whose family, including his wife and children, have grown up in the home along with Catherine, he wants to preserve it for his family's continued use. And he will retain the westernmost lot, the one we've been talking about on the surveys, and he does desire to rotate the home 90 degrees to move it onto that lot. Catherine will retain the other lot where at some point a new home will be built. That is the eastern lot, the one next to lot 38, which there was a letter writer, I think, from lot 38 in the file. Interestingly, Mark and Catherine actually have the original construction blueprints for the home, which is not only kind of a neat thing, but it really helps when you want to have a contractor look at jacking it up and rotating it 90 degrees, so you know where all the beams and internal structures located. They also have the original contract, which is in much more narrative form than you, me, or Glenn or Fred would probably think to do for construction contract in 2023 versus 1926. But that's not only significant, but it talks about in there, if you read you probably can't see it, but the last sentence of the first paragraph talks about how it is to be first-class workmanship that will be insisted upon. Again, this wasn't a home that was slapped together. It was put together with some significant construction means and finishes. The support beams inside are solid oak, and the main beam running the length of the home underneath is 18 inches wide. It does have 4 bedrooms and 2.5 baths. This, as I mentioned, is the north elevation looking from Park Avenue, and again, you can see the front door there. The plans for the home are to rotate it 90 degrees, as you can see. The plan on the left is the current situation for that property. The plan on the right shows that it has been rotated 90 degrees. So basically, the front door that you see here, that will face west towards the next door lot. And then the doors that you see internally, these actually are the doors that lead onto the porch that faces the east. They will become the front doors to the home. And this is actually a good point to show you what the inside of the house looks like. It is all solid wood throughout. There's tongue and groove paneling on the walls, wide board tongue and groove paneling, and then there's the beadboard roofs. And that's the way it is throughout the entire house. It is one of the original Rehoboth. I don't even think you can call it a cottage because it's bigger than that, but they don't certainly build them like this anymore. And this is sort of a style that you see when you travel and you know, are fortunate enough to be guests in the older homes in Rehoboth. So going back to this drawing, you see on the left side of the left lot, on the existing conditions, there's a structure that's kind of shaped like an oddly shaped T, I guess. That's the porches, and there's a sleeping porch above that. Those will not be moved just because they wouldn't fit. They would put us over the FAR. Plus, structurally, it's difficult to move a porch versus a home. I know there was the letter that talked about the moss, et cetera, that one of the neighbors has complained about. That is on that screen porch area that will be demolished for the relocation of the home. When you look at the pictures, you can see that obviously the Wagners have maintained their home. You know, when you look at the front door, when you look at the front elevations, when you look at the different portions of it, we all live in homes that are near the ocean, so there is ongoing maintenance obligations. There is moss on that one side where the porch is. Obviously, they're not going to tear off siding and replace it on something that's going to also hopefully be demolished as part of this move. But I just don't see that as a significant issue. So once it is rotated, let me go back to that survey. There will be a new covered porch that's located along, facing on Park Avenue with those doors that I mentioned earlier. And at this point, based on initial preliminary conversations with Matt, it will all be in compliance. The house will, except for the variance that we need for the 7/10 of the foot, which is that 14-foot run right along there. And you can see in red sort of the need for the variance, which is on the east side of the home. So it's somewhere less than 12 square feet running down the side of that home. One of the things at this point I wanted to stop.
14 feet, is it not? It seems that number keeps changing.
No, it's 14 feet.
14 running feet.
14 running feet, 12 square feet.
At
Yeah, just of area. You know, in other words, that's small. So it's the 14 running feet.
At 8.4 inches wide.
Yeah, running
14
the whole
feet
way.
long.
Right. Thank you. I want to hit the pause button too on this, just so you know that there was thought that went into the relocation of the home. One of the things that they really took into consideration is a way to place the home in such a way that preserved as many trees as possible on those lots. You all have been by there. I think some of you live in that neighborhood in the Pines. So you know this is a pretty heavily treed lot. For the most part, there's going to be just one tree removed, which is this one right here. That's a magnolia tree, and it's actually one that Mark planted when he was a kid. The other ones are all 100 years old or so. As you can see, those on this lot are going to be preserved out in front. And the one that everybody seems, neighbors-wise, to take the most concern about is the laurel that's out front that flowers every year. That's going to stay. And that's why the house is set back further from Park Avenue than it could be. You'll see it's set back 31 feet off of Park. I don't see a dimension, or that's 31 feet, it looks like off the setback off Park. But anyhow, it's further back than it needs to be on Park, and that's so that they can preserve all these trees up front in this area, including that laurel. The rotation of the home has been reviewed and designed by Boardwalk Builders. Kelsey and her team have crawled all over the house and under it to determine if the move is feasible. Obviously, if it wasn't, we wouldn't be here today. So that has been done. She's also had meetings, Mark and Kelsey both together and independently with Matt, to discuss what upgrades need to be done to the home as part of the move. One of the things, just to be clear on, they don't intend to move it and strip it down to the studs, because that then loses a lot of the historical significance, both inside and out. There's going to have to be renovations done to some windows and siding repairs and things like that, but it's going to be kept intact to the extent possible as part of this move. But all of that has been thoroughly considered, and I will say it's not a cheap process. In Rehoboth, sometimes it's just easier to tear down a house and start from scratch, and they don't want to do that because of this 100-year-old home. And there were some questions about the process. This is step one of the process. We need to get these variances in place because the partition would go completely differently if we were in front of the Planning Commission and we weren't rotating the home 90 degrees. It would just be torn down and it would be a clean slate and done. We know we have to do that. And then step three will be, as everybody alluded to work with Matt on the building permits with regard to the move of the home, with regard to FAR calculations, natural area calculations, all those things. I will say preliminarily those have been looked at, and from everything that Boardwalk has done, that still complies. Again, and if that was a non-starter, we also wouldn't be here. I mean, the point being that the due diligence has been done on that. So what I'd like to do is go through the variances, and then if we need to deal with the appeal of the nonconformity on the accessory structure, we'll deal with that. I hope we don't have to, but if we do, we can. And I'm good, just because I think it's easier if I go through all the quick check standards for both at the same time, I'll do that. I realize you have to vote on each of them separately, and if you have questions on each one separately, I'm obviously going to answer those. But at the outset, me, Matt, and Glenn, one of the things we looked at with regard to the home was whether it could simply be granted as an administrative variance permitted by the code. The code allows, it's 270-28, administrative variances for existing structures. The code doesn't define what an existing structure is. This is an existing structure. It's just going to be in a bit different spot at the end of the day. And actually, in one of the conversations I had with Glenn and one of his attorneys, they even asked, why aren't you doing this? And we said, well, we didn't want to fight that battle. Maybe it could be, maybe it couldn't be. The code's kind of gray on that because it is an existing structure. We'll just go the variance route. But I'm not going to argue that point, but I just want to let you know that we explored that as well to see what made the most sense for moving forward. Then it was questioned whether the relocation of the home affected the accessory building on the structure. One thing I want to clear up, this has been called a whole bunch of different things over the course of its history. For whatever reason, Foresight called this thing a carriage house. I'm not sure why it's called that. I know Matt put in his records other surveys that called it garage and other things. It is, like so many of us have, a garage that probably fit a Model T in it back in the 1920s. And you can see the exterior of it. This is the front of it if you're looking from like the backyard towards the back of the house. This is looking from the west boundary line, sort of east, I guess. So this is the western facade of that garage. And you can see there's a big old garage door on there. This is the eastern side of it, and there's a garage or entry there. So to orient you, and I'm going to show photos of this, this garage door leads into a completely unfinished space that's got garage or garbage cans, bikes, and beach stuff in it. If it was mine, it would have a beer fridge in it, but there's no electricity. This shows the doorway. This is the door to what I call an inside-outside shower. And frankly, it's brilliant because most people have their outside shower protruding out from a structure. This has a door into the structure that you walk into to use the outside shower. It just happens to be under the roof of the garage, and I'll show you that in a moment. And then this is a doorway into gardening supplies and that sort of thing. There's no livable space, and well, I can just show you. This shows. You can see how that door opens, and literally it opens to a curtain rod where the shower is. So if you're taking an outside shower, you come out of the back of the house, which is sort of this way, walk a couple steps, walk through that shower curtain, and you're in the outside shower, which happens to be under the roof of that garage apartment. Then this shows the interior of the shower itself. And you can see the plumbing in there is ancient. I mean, it's the porcelain knobs. And Mark advised me that this shower head has some quirky significance to it. It was actually from the old Henlopen Hotel that Mark and his dad purchased in 1970 at a Henlopen Hotel garage sale or sidewalk sale or something when they were getting rid of all their old fixtures. So that has been there. The head has been there since the 1970s. The shower has been there who knows how long. And you can kind of see that if you look through the back wall of its tongue and groove, just like the inside of the house. So it's, I mean, all that stuff is really old. And that shows the inside of the garage. So to orient yourselves, behind this wall here is where that shower is. There's no other living space on the other side of that. This is the hot water heater that was installed, and I guess they didn't get a permit for it. The question that nobody that knows the answer to, at least I don't, is whether there was originally a hot water heater there to serve that shower that's been there forever. Because I don't know that you need a permit to pull to replace a hot water heater, you know, and if the thing was there forever, there wouldn't have been one in the first place. But anyhow, the point being that this is truly an accessory. I don't even know that you call it a garage anymore, because with all Mark's stuffing into bikes and trash cans, which are stored in here versus out on Park Avenue like some others, you know, you couldn't even really want to park a car in there. But that's what it is. It's not, I think, a carriage house, like Forsyth called it, is really overselling what it is.
So it does have electricity.
No, that's a gas hot water heater. Okay. Yeah, there's not electricity.
Just asking.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I had the same question as well. So it's gas, you know. But yeah, and if you look, there's not any like conduit or anything running through it or outlets, you know, along those studs or anything. So there's not any in there. Which means you're taking a shower in the dark if you go out there at nighttime, because there's not even a light out there. One other thing I just wanted to show, there was a question about the upkeep of the home. This is actually the quote-unquote sleeping porch that's above those porches that are going to be torn down that face the property to the east. We only threw this in here just to show that the house is being maintained. When you look at that sleeping porch, you know, it's high quality. You can see it's tongue and groove throughout. The paint's fine. It's got nice furniture in it. You know, just like the interior of the house is right here. It's all high quality, well-maintained properties. So again, with regard to that carriage house or accessory structure, rather than try to figure out whether it's non-conforming or all that, the easiest way that we all sort of agreed was to just come before you all and get your blessing for it by confirming that it's allowed to remain where it always has been for about 100 years. That also eliminates a title question on it, whether this property was configured in its 100 by 100 size or if it was split into 50 by 100 parcels. You know, that's a title issue that would need to be resolved at some point or another. So by granting this variance, that resolves that with regard to that accessory structure. And with regard to the accessory structure too, just so it's on the record, they don't have any plans to renovate that or try to turn it into anything that it's not right now. You know, when this gets done, Mark's going to hopefully have his house turned 90 degrees. The city will have an old home preserved, and they will still have a place to take their outside showers, park their bikes, keep their trash and their beach stuff and their gardening supplies. So I don't want you to think that we're doing anything with that house at all. It's just because it's there, we're dealing with it. So with regard to the variance standards themselves, Chairwoman Coniston, you mentioned quick check, so I'm going to run through those. The first one is the nature of the zone where the property lies. For both of those, this is the same. It's R1 residential. Dwellings and accessory uses are both permitted in the district. When you look at the court cases that have analyzed quick check, this is frankly the easiest one to deal with. If it's the same as everything else out there and the zoning permits it, it's satisfied. So that one's not really an issue. Whether the variances are consistent with the character of the neighborhood. This property is in the Pines, and it is actually in the vicinity. I think it's right next door to where the corner cupboard was, if you all are familiar with that.
It's farther down.
Well, with the corner cupboard properties, because there was a sort of
Right.
a compound, you know, where there was the restaurant and then she had her home and room. Yeah, no, that's a fair point. And there is a variety of old and new homes in this area of the Pines. They have garages, sheds, Some have garage apartments. If you go far enough back in the Pines, there's a railroad car. There's even a few log cabins back in there. And so what we're faced with, though, all over Rehoboth, including the Pines, is that many of these older homes are being demolished. Mark and Sonia and Catherine want to preserve the character of the neighborhood by preserving this home. And so we would submit that the home and the accessory structure, frankly, are the desired character of the neighborhood. And I would say that when you look, and I'm going to get into this a little bit, but the city's comprehensive plan, both the 2010 and 2020 plan, and particularly the 2020 plan, went through the entire city and broke it down by neighborhoods. And it talked about what kind of homes you had in each neighborhood. And it actually talks about these kinds of homes in the Pines. So it defines the character. This home satisfies the character. The third item is whether there's serious effect on neighboring properties. With regard to that side yard variance, that will be along the common boundary, so that's where it is right there, along the common boundary with Mark's sister, Catherine. She's going to own this lot, so she's the one who will be impacted by it, and obviously she's here today as an applicant, so there's not any detriment to her. The 7/10 of a foot, that will not be noticeable to the eye if you're out here on Park Avenue. I would also point out that we have multiple letters in support of the application, which I know you all have read, but I do want to highlight a few of those. We have one from, I don't know if it's Henlopen or Henlopen, LLC, Kathy McDaniel, and she states, and this goes to this element, that's why I want to quote some of these, the encroachment of 7.7 feet in the side yard setback will not adversely affect the proposed adjacent parcel. In addition, we support the existing accessory structure to remain. The structure's been in place for decades without impacting the neighborhood. Ken and Tamara Benson, they own 43 Columbia. They say, we believe the property, and specifically the Wagner House, is an iconic architectural structure that should be preserved to the greatest extent possible. We believe the proposed variances would accomplish this goal. We are concerned that our community is losing such important architectural landmarks. The Wagner's request for variances is more than reasonable. It would have limited, if any, impact regarding setbacks, and importantly, would provide for the preservation of an iconic Rehoboth Beach structure. And I'm pulling out parts of each of these just that's relevant. Andrea Kirstein, she owns 22 Park. She says, I have known the Wagner family since the mid-1990s and have spent a considerable amount of time in their home. I believe their property is an iconic architectural structure that should be preserved to the greatest extent possible. As a family that has considered Rehoboth Beach our summer home for 40 years, I have become concerned that our community is losing such important architectural landmarks. The Wagner's request for variances is more than reasonable, would have limited, if any, impact regarding setbacks, and importantly, would provide for the preservation of an iconic Rehoboth Beach structure. Further, it is far more attractive and fitting than just another new and shiny house constructed with only profit in mind. And then we have Elizabeth and Mark Creel, or Creel, I'm not sure. They're nearby neighbors. We feel that allowing the dwelling to encroach 0.7 feet into the side yard has no significant aesthetic impact on other neighbors. In addition, we feel that the accessory structure has existed for so long that it's logical for a new or accessory structure of similar size, which we're not doing, to remain in the same location footprint on the property. And then finally, Ann Lynham, and I apologize, there's a question on that. She sent one to me, and I wanted to make sure it got to Ann Womack, just in case. It sounds like she sent it directly, so just for the record, you can use the one she sent. Oh, really? Okay. Well, I'm going to read from the one she sent me, which I assume is the same as the one she sent you. It says, I am sending this email in support of the Wagner family, who I've known since 1962. They were the first tenants we ever had at our Lakeshore Apartments. You probably all know her Lakeshore Apartments were on behind the Henlopen, where their house is now that overlooks that lake. They had sort of looked like a row of townhomes. We truly love Rehoboth, and hopefully the city will grant them the variance they need to continue to enjoy the home they grew up in. So there's several letters that are in support of this and actually talk about that there are minimal effects on neighboring properties. There is one objection letter. As I mentioned, she complains about the condition of the home. I already went through the photos of the interior. You've seen the exterior. You've seen that sleeping porch that faces her. I don't think the condition of the home is really relevant based on that or to this, particularly when what she's complaining about, we admit, is going to be removed. As a matter of fact, she won't be able to see the variance because she lives here, there's going to be a new house here, and the variance is here. So, while this home is now 12 feet away from her property, the new home is going to be, doing the math, 69 feet away from her property. And then with regard to that accessory structure, there is no effect on the neighboring properties by granting it. It is not moving. Because it's not moving, there's zero effect. It's been there for 100 years. The status quo is simply being preserved. And I'm not aware, unless there's testimony today, that anyone has really objected to the existence of that structure or the variances that have been sought. So we feel that that third item has been satisfied. The fourth one is the applicants are faced with an exceptional practical difficulties. I do want to start with the city's comprehensive plan, because historically the plans here have strived to find ways to maintain existing homes. If you look at the community character element of your comp plan, it talks about each of the distinctive neighborhoods, as I mentioned, and at page 318, 3-18, it decries the lack of historic preservation and the demolition of historic buildings. At the end of that goal, it talks about, or excuse me, that element, it talks about the goals and actions, action items to achieve or reverse this trend, and that's at page 322. And there's a whole list of them. We can't comply with the comp plan, the city can't comply with the comp plan, and the Board of Adjustment shouldn't be able to ignore the comp plan, and that's why we are requesting the variance. I do want to point out one particular action item, which is under that element. It's item H, and an action item of the city is promote and consider offering incentives to make it economically feasible to renovate, restore historic structures rather than demolish and build new. So again, that's referenced historically throughout the city's comp plans. The other thing is, if you're just around town, that's the one thing everybody talks about. That you drive up and down every street, people are tearing down houses and building brand new ones. I mean, my neighbors talk about it on the south side of town. People on the north side of town speak about it. It's all over social media whenever you see anything about that. The Cape Gazette actually does an article every year that says, these are all the demolition permits that have been pulled, and they usually have an editorial saying, we should do something to stop this. So setting aside even the comprehensive plan, there's an outcry in town to do what you can to preserve historic structures. And a denial of this variance will result in this home being demolished. That in and of itself is an exceptional practical difficulty. Just as a practical matter, denying the variance would require 7/10 of the east side of the home to be shaved off, which is structurally impossible. The demolition of the home is a drastic outcome when balanced with the minimal variance that is being sought, and it's not supported by the comprehensive plan. Frankly, as I said, it's one that we thought, at least explored, that it could be granted administratively. And it's not it is an exceptional practical difficulty to require the accessory structure to be torn down where it stands when there are no plans to do anything with it at all. If the house was being demolished and the lots are being partitioned, it is likely that this could stay. I know there was a question about that, and that's for a later day if we go through the partition process as to what can stay. But the city's taken the position that if it's a legal nonconforming structure as part of the partition and you don't encroach on anything and the structure is not being moved, that it can stay. This happens to be a partition that was over on Stokely Street that I was involved in, and it's 213 and I think it's 215 Stokely. This was the existing house on 213. That's since been replaced by a new one. Or was the existing house. It's not there anymore. This is the existing house that was on 215 Stokely and a shed. And it was allowed to remain, and it's still there today if you go drive by it, where the home encroached into the setbacks because it was legally nonconforming, and the shed encroached into the setbacks, even though it is legally nonconforming. You can see that as part of that partition process, the city signed off on this in 2020 on both of these, and it's since been recorded. I'm not here to argue that point, but just simply say that we know we got to deal with that as part of the partition. And since it came up, I just wanted to bring that up. The bottom line is we want the variance for that accessory structure so that we know that there's no question that it can remain where it's been for 100 years and remain there for another 100 years. The fifth element that's not really quick check, but is talked about a lot, is whether the variances are minimal. As we talked about, 7/10 of a foot here is minimal, at least in my opinion. I think common sense says that that's the case. And then I don't know how you get any more minimal on a garage that's existed 100 years without complaint. Again, it's a maintaining of the status quo with regard to that particular structure. There's some additional advantages outside of quick check. As we talked about, it saves an iconic Rehoboth home, which is a goal of the comprehensive plan. It allows 2 heritage trees of over 100 years to be preserved, and that maintains passive cooling and ecosystem services. As Mark determined, and we put in here, it prevents emissions associated with the new construction, takes off vehicle trips for the year based on what would be involved in new construction. And there's a savings of electricity that's avoided by the relocation of the home. So, in summary, there are a lot of justifications for granting the variance that will allow this home to be conserved. It allows a marriage of Delaware's climate action plan, which were those figures we talked about just a moment ago, with the city's 2020 comprehensive development plan, and it allows the home and accessory structures to remain with residents calling for preservation of old Rehoboth charm. So we believe we've satisfied all the quick check standards. We've satisfied the code. The spirit of the ordinance, code, or regulation is observed. That's what's in your code. The spirit of that, really, we feel is set out in the comprehensive plan that desires the preservation of homes. And it doesn't substantially impair the intent and purpose of the zoning ordinance. This home's been there for 100 years. The accessory structure's been there for 100 years. It's a minimal variance with regard to the relocation of the home. So that's my presentation. What I wanted to do was wrap up with, I sent Andrea Kirstein just a thank you. She copied me when she sent her letter to Ann. And my comment to her was just thanks for sending it, and I'll make sure it gets in front of the board if it's not. And she said, I'm happy to help. And her comment was, it would be such a waste and heartbreaking if the variance isn't granted. So I think that sort of sums it up. This is a 100-year-old house that we're losing too many of, and this is a creative way to preserve it. And with that, we hope that you'll act favorably upon the application. Thank you.
Does anybody from the,
One quick thing, would this be a good time or not for you to ask Mr. Wagner if that was your intention?
Yeah, I will. I don't, sometimes you all do it with public comment. I can bring him up now if you'd like.
I'm just a question.
Okay. Well, Mr. Wagner, why don't you come forward then?
there's,
Then we'll have to swear him in.
Yes.
Yes, hello, I'm Mark Wagner.
And your address, please. You're the
My
applicant.
local address is 40 Park Avenue in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware.
And do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony given this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do so attest.
Very good.
Mr. Wagner, just real quick, and I think you might have a few things to say. You've heard my presentation this afternoon. Do you agree with everything that I've stated this afternoon?
I do. Vince has said everything that is true and correct in my mind, and I agree 100%.
Is there anything that you'd like to add?
Well, thank you. I was going to say a few words if I have a few moments. I know we've already taken a lot of your time, but I'll try to do that. And maybe if I can remove this, I don't have to bend over so much. So I wanted to just, I noticed throughout the presentation that there were a couple things that sort of got glossed over a little bit. So for example, when we moved into the house, we knew the Thompsons, we knew the Gundrys, we knew the Fancourts, we knew the Walkers. Those houses have largely disappeared. And so I feel that it's important to me personally to try to create something that's not just for me, but also for the community. I also think that there's some comments about the auxiliary structure, and Matt, was pointing out the change in the designation of that structure. But I took a shower every day in that outside shower, starting in 1970 through every day that I've ever been here in Rehoboth, except when it's too cold. Also, I wanted to say that the 12 square feet, the 14-foot run of 7 inches is offset by the construction of the house, which has some zigs and zags, which will give back close to 400 square feet. So as far as the footprint of the property, it's much less than would fill up a zero lot line construction. And it does allow us to keep some iconic trees. And I would just want to point out one thing in particular, that even the Clydes who built this house felt that way about trees, because on this plot, this tree here is probably 200 years old. And the house was built specifically around it. And so I just wanted to point that out. I think that that's probably enough for me to say, but I do want to try to emphasize that we care about Rehoboth. I grew up my entire life here. I worked for Mr. Lynham from 1970 until 1981. The money that I made there helped me go to graduate in school, but it also taught me about environmental stewardship and community service. And those are two of the things that I'm trying to accomplish that go beyond just our family. I grew up there, my sister and I grew up there, my children grew up there, and my grandchild, my daughter's child, who's now 2, I hope that he'll be able to grow up and experience Rehoboth, which is a wonderful place to be, and allows you freedom, allows you growth, and so those are important to me. And I'll stop there. I could wax on forever, but thank you for your consideration. Thank you.
And then Kelsey, if you could just come forward real quick. Thank you, Mark. Kelsey, if you could introduce yourself, and then Mr. Townsend will have.
Hello, I'm Kelsey Hamilton with Boardwalk Builders.
Ms. Hamilton, do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you, Kelsey. If you could, you've heard everything I stated. I know you don't know the history about the house, and Mark's family history, but at least the parts you're familiar with, was all that true and correct, to the best of your understanding?
Correct, yep. Everything I heard was correct.
And you all have done the studies to see if this is feasibly possible to move it in 90 degrees?
Yes, so I know there was a question about the condition of the existing house and if it would be feasible to actually pick it up and rotate it and put it on a new foundation. Based on everything I've seen, the interior of the house, even though it's largely original, is still in excellent shape, even in the basement, which typically in this area, they're not parts of the house that I like to go in. The basement is in good shape as well. I know that their exterior could use some cosmetic updates that we would say are typical of a house built in 1926, especially this close to the ocean. And the Wagners have considered those updates as part of the next phase. So it didn't seem like an efficient approach to go ahead and do new exterior siding, since we know that the porches on the east side will be removed. Any replacement siding at this point would just require further repair after the removal of the porches and the relocation of the structure.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
When the house is moved, are you going to replace the basement with
Yes.
with a Rehoboth basement or a basement?
I believe that to be true, a Rehoboth basement.
A Rehoboth basement, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
No one else.
Question?
Sure, yeah.
Question of Kelsey, if you don't mind, we have a few more questions, probably a lot of them. So the new house will have an entire new foundation, is that correct?
So it's the existing house with a new foundation,
Right, the new- right.
correct?
So the foundation will be new. Why is it not possible to simply make it 6 inches shorter in that 14-inch strip?
That's a great question, and I would definitely need to defer to a structural engineer to talk about the nuances involved with that. But based on what I know, that 14-inch strip would affect a bathroom, a bedroom, and a laundry room. It would affect the roof structure, and it would pretty much go from top to bottom on the exterior of the house. So to accomplish that, I think, and I don't know that this would be feasible, I think you would need to build new exterior walls on the inside of the house in all of those locations and confirm that they were structurally sound. And then from the outside, actually do the demolition until you got to that new exterior wall, at which point you would need to do new exterior finishes, and then you'd be stuck remodeling the rooms on the inside. So because it would affect a bathroom, that would lead to a pretty substantial remodel.
That would not be insurmountable. That seems very practical.
Well, wouldn't it involve
I am not a structural engineer.
It would involve pulling down the corner posts of the house. Is the house balloon framed where they run all the way?
I believe it's post and beam,
Okay.
so it's not balloon.
Is that one story or two story, that little
It's-
part that pops out?
It's 2-story.
So that's floor joists, that's walls, that's
Yeah, I
electric,
would
that's
say
plumbing,
when we
that's roof
speak about
structure.
it in words here, it sounds feasible. It sounds like a good idea. And then as you get into the nitty gritty of how that house was constructed and how you would need to orchestrate the details to protect that, I do think it would be insurmountable.
Let me put it another way. If that was what you were faced with, wouldn't the reasonable next step be just tear down the house?
I suppose.
I think actually Mr. Wagner should make that decision.
Well, no, I disagree with that, because what we're looking at is it's a balancing test. It's an exceptional practical difficulty. Are you talking about tearing off 7 inches of wall, which is the wall structure for the home, and then have to support the entire rest of the house? Is that completely out of balance with granting a 7-inch variance? If that's the case, we might as well never grant a variance in Rehoboth Beach. That's what it comes down to.
Any other questions?
I believe your client also wanted to speak, but she needs to come forward and.
Yeah. Thank you, Kelsey. Yeah, you can come on up. If you could introduce yourself, and you'll be sworn in by Mr. Townsend.
Hi, I'm Catherine Wagner Palmer, and which address would you like me to give? I live in
You're fine.
Salem, Massachusetts, 5 Fairfield Street in Salem, Massachusetts, and my home here is 40 Park Avenue in Rehoboth Beach.
And do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. So I wanted to just add that, like Mark, my love of old houses and preservation started here in Rehoboth at this house. I now live in Salem, which is a very historic area, and have lived in 3 historic houses. One built in 1765, one in 1782, and now our most recent new house, 1920. So this house is post and beam. I have part of my experience has been in replacing a summer beam that had been rotted in our 1762 house. To do that, we had to hire restoration carpenters, order a special beam, 12 by 12. We're talking about 18-inch timbers in this house. And we had to gut the entire house. So having some experience with post and beam construction and what exists in this house, you couldn't structurally, and I'm not a structural engineer by any stretch, but seeing what goes into reconstructing something built in that genre, it would not be a simple matter, and it would definitely interfere with the structural integrity of the house. So I just wanted to affirm that this is a labor of love to preserve this house. It means a lot to our family and the generations that have grown up here. So thank you.
Thank you.
Questions?
No.
So I was thinking we'd get the applicant and questions out of the way, and then we'd hear from the public.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
do we have questions for Mr. Robertson?
For Mr. Robertson here. I do not have questions for him at this point.
Thank you.
Bill? No. I have one question, and that when you add the square footage of the structure in the rear, the accessory building, and the house, what do you get?
I don't know the number to that because we'll have to deal with that again when we partition it. But my understanding from speaking with Kelsey is that it's still it's under the FAR.
It's under 3,000 square
yeah.
feet, the two together.
Yeah.
Thank
Because that was one of the threshold questions we had, because if it was over, we wouldn't even deal with it. It'd be gone, so, yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't mean to sound like I was dodging that question. I just didn't know, and I knew she
No,
had
no,
done
it's
the work.
fine.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't have anything.
One other question. Do we have a picture or, I'm sorry, do we have a picture or a rendition of what it will look like from the street once it's turned?
We don't, except for, why is this not working? Yeah. So I don't, except for this will be facing the side, and this,
No, not through. I was just curious. Mr. Robinson had said that it'll look like the other homes in the neighborhood. It'll stay within the character of the neighborhood. But I'm thinking once it turned, will it?
Yeah.
yeah, because most of them are long ways.
Long and narrow.
And so what will happen is, as I mentioned, this doorway right here is going to be the front door. So it'll be a double door front door. And then as you can see, there will be, oops, going the wrong way, sorry. There's going to be a new porch that's constructed over the front. So there will be an entryway. You'll look into a screen porch type structure like you see on every house in the Pines just about with that entryway. So there'll be a single entrance here, and then the double doors here that then takes you into that living room that we showed. So.
And then if I live in house, which is lot T, it appears here, what will I see when I look out my window? Will I see the side of the house with the little porch yet there?
You will, yeah, you will see that side, and that will all be legal. So as far as Lot T,
Including that little porch thing there?
the porch overhang, I don't
Overhang,
believe is
yeah.
going to stay because that would encroach. So there will be that side door, and that will be what they will see, less this part because that comes off, remember, so it's going to be.
Right, I
this side of the
understand.
house.
I'm just trying to get a visualization of
yeah.
what it will look like.
And so, I mean, we didn't go into that too much because that's sort of really neither here nor there because since it's compliant on that
Well,
side
it
of the
is
house.
here or there, in that you specify, when we're talking about the quick checks, that indeed it fits into the neighborhood. And I'm not sure when it's sideways if it is going to fit into the neighborhood.
Well, every house that's on a 50 by 100 lot in Rehoboth is built long ways with the narrow end of it on the street side and the long side of it going backwards to the rear of the house. The second thing is that doesn't matter because that's an architectural issue. That part of it, they could build a brand new house today, which many do with a side door on the side, put an outside shower on the side and a walkway down the side, depending on where you have your driveway into.
Is that typical of the neighborhood? It's what I'm thinking.
Yes,
wondering about.
even Ms. Connessy's not in her head. It's
I
just-
hate to say it, Mark, but, all from, I guess, not next door to them, but one down, where the lots that Mrs. Hooper had for the corner cupboard.
Yeah.
Well, Edie probably knows, they're all long and narrow, all the way down, including to where and they all have a pool in the backyard.
Yeah.
So,
The problem
which
is.
I can hear from my house.
Yeah, no, the issue is that they all look that way because under the FAR and everything else, you almost are squeezed into that building envelope where they're all long and narrow like that, so. Yeah,
Well, on a 50 by 100 lot, you don't have much choice.
Yeah, you really don't.
So it's
Yeah.
really the lot size that
yeah.
impacts.
Yep. But, the point being though too is that when you look at from the front, it is going to look more like the traditional older homes because it's not a box. Most of the 50 by 100 lots we see, it is long and this one actually isn't all that long and narrow compared to most of them. They come and stretch out all the way, and there's a front porch that goes straight across the front with a front door somewhere here. Here, even the facade's broken up because you're going to have this porch here. There's a step back here. There's another step back. There's the side entrance here, and then there's this part here. So it's not all one wall of house like you get on the newer homes either, which I think makes it unique, which is more like the older homes in the Pines. So
Your client has his,
that's up to you all. Yeah, come on up.
That's fine with you, isn't it?
oh, sure, sure, he's been sworn in, right, so he doesn't have to get
Yeah.
sworn in.
Hi, it's Mark Wagner again. I wanted to speak to the character of the neighborhood. So all of the windows on the second floor are gabled on all four sides of the house. And when you rotate the house, what is on the east-facing side now is a peaked roof. And what we're doing is trying to build another gable within that upper gable to create a similar look and feel. And so there will be a small porch, smaller than the sleeping porch on the front. Now it would be facing north, and underneath would be just a portico, which is quite similar to all the other houses along the street. We will not be putting a screen porch on the front there because I don't really want to sit out on the street. Basically, to me, it's like too close. They've built them out to the front, and then they go a little bit over the setback, and then there's you know, people walking their dog and, you know, the people are right there. I don't want that. We want to keep that laurel. We want to keep that big oak, and we want to create a little sort of, you know, obviously we're reducing our space, but create a little bit of privacy and a little bit of green out front. I was thinking of putting a little bench there, sit under the tree kind of thing, but no porch. If we build a porch, it will be somewhere else at a different time. And, you know, in that sort of space we've given back there. Sorry to go to the map again.
Yeah. Well, and one thing too that it brings up that just because we're talking about it. Oh, go ahead.
Here would be
obviously, that complies with FAR and everything else.
So
But the one, just real quick, as we're on this, I'm sorry, it occurs to me that I want to highlight this again. This is consistent with the long and narrow homes in the Pines and elsewhere in Rehoboth on a 50 by 100 lot. The difference is that if somebody just built a brand new house here, this tree's gone, that tree's gone, that tree's probably gone. These may be saved, this one's probably gone, because by the time they come in and demolish the whole thing and put in the basement and everything else, those old trees are gone. I mean, you're gonna have to plant lots of replacement trees, granted, but by doing this, in addition to preserving the home, we preserve a lot of those big old trees on the Pines, so.
I was just looking at this diagram after Mark made his comment. I see covered porch here on the front. Am I misreading, or maybe I misunderstood his comment, and it seems to be on the front, on the working version?
You'd have to go into the microphone, Mark.
It's okay. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a disconnect between what I was reading and what I thought you said.
So what we're trying to do, Vince, if you go to the picture of the sleeping porch that you provided, or I guess that I
sure,
provided
yeah.
to you,
Yeah.
that there's a door that leads off the master bedroom that goes out onto the sleeping porch. So what we would do in the new construction is have a similar thing out the door onto a smaller structure in the front. So that would be on the second floor. On the ground floor is just columns to support that, and then just a
okay.
porch. I mean, whatever you want to call it.
It's a second floor covered porch.
Yes.
I understand now.
Okay.
I didn't explain that very well,
thought
but
it
yeah,
was both
that's the
stories.
portico
Thank you
that
for
they're
the,
gonna see.
thank you for the
It won't be
clarification.
screened, it will be
Yeah.
enclosed.
I understand. Thank you for the clarification.
does anyone have any further questions for Mr. Robertson?
No.
Okay. So now we go to the public.
And thank you for your time and consideration. It was a lot
thank-
to digest and pictures and whatnot. Sometimes pictures are worth 1,000 words, so thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
My name is Patrick O'Donnell, and I'm here with my wife, Jan. We own 39 Oak Avenue, immediately adjacent to the subject property.
Testimony given this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. And our main concern, and we associate ourselves with a written comment of Karen Medford, which is in the record, but our main concern is the auxiliary house. And as I understand it, the protocol in this town, which I've suffered and enjoyed, is such that when you do a major thing like this, you rebuild, you move, et cetera, you don't get the grandfathering in the back place. And that garage is right on top of us. My bet is it's right on the property line, but it's just there. It's overwhelming. It's in disrepair. We've asked the former owner to let us paint it just to get it looking better. She said, don't touch it. I'll sue you if you touch it. So that's kind of what we're facing. And they're going to get it. They're asking for extraordinary relief here, but they can't have their cake and eat it too. The back should be compliant with the law as outlined, and that the setback should be, 4 feet or 6 feet, whatever it was. We would urge you to enforce that part of the situation. My wife would like to say a couple of words also.
I'll be a little easier to take. I'm Jan O'Donnell, and I live at 39 Oak.
And do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give in this proceeding will be the
I
truth, the whole
do.
truth?
I just wanted to say that many years ago, when Mrs. Wagner was still alive, I approached her because we'd been looking at the back of this auxiliary building for years, and I said, it's, the paint's peeling and it's looking, I'm sorry. The paint is peeling and it's not attractive, and we do a lot in our backyard, and we'd be willing to pay for it to have it painted. And she said, absolutely not. So it's been that way for years now, with the paint peeling off and looking unsightly. I just mentioned that. Might have something to do with the way my husband behaved. So anyway, I'd like to have that considered.
So, ma'am, if that shed were to be relocated, and I don't know that it's possibly that it would withstand being relocated, but if it were relocated so that it was a few feet nearer the, or inside the building envelope, would that make much difference to you?
I would like to say yes, but I don't think it would make that much difference. I would like it to be attractive.
Don, how about a fence? Have you ever considered a fence?
You need to be near the microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mrs. O'Donnell, I'm sorry. Have you considered just putting a fence up?
We have not,
just
because
curious.
the garage serves as a border. We don't need a fence there.
Did I understand your comment to be that you're looking to have it look better as opposed to removed?
Yes. Well,
And moved back, he just said.
Patrick says moved back. And I just know, I don't think the building could sustain being moved, number one. But in order to have peace in the neighborhood, I'd be happy to have it just stay the way it is, but have them take care of it, have it maintained properly and look attractive, because it makes up about a third of our backyard.
Okay, thank you. Can we ask the applicant to respond to the comments of the public, and particularly the request
You can if you
that
like.
she's asked?
So you don't want to hear from me, you want to hear from...
Yeah, I think I'd like to hear.
Mark Wagner again. I didn't know that my mom had said something so outrageously aggressive about suing the neighbors. I do remember that we did discuss when the O'Donnells put in a fence that, great, we sort of thought, we have a fence too, so I always thought, well, why don't we just take down our fence, because their fence is right there, and there's a bunch of stuff that grows up in between. So, but I'm happy to, I can have it painted. If they would like scraped and painted, I could put some triptych of their choice, picture of dollies or something, anything. We're happy to paint it, and it can be just straight paint. It can be some kind of like art. I'm happy to do whatever if it helps to alleviate the situation.
Is it your desire to be a good neighbor?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
That works.
It's very gracious of him to do that, but we would still like you to enforce the current setback provisions.
Thank you. I kind of think you've responded already, Vince, or do you want to respond some more?
No, I don't have anything more to respond to the responses that I've responded to.
Well, thank you for your presentation today. Does anybody else have anything they want to add? And then we'll close this part of the hearing, and the board will discuss.
Sounds like no.
No? Okay.
I'm so sorry. Can I say one thing?
Come to the microphone. Identify yourself, please.
Hi, it's Catherine Palmer again. I just wanted to mention, I think Vince did say it, but the shower that was allegedly added at some time after the original construction, I really question that, because certainly when we moved in 1970, it was there, and the pipes, were never replaced. And I, in fact, in the 70s, painted a lovely pink swirly thing on the inside of that shower. So spent a lot of time in there. So I can assure you that it was not added at any time before or after 2008 when, allegedly it changed. So I think it, from my experience, it's always been there. So.
Thank you. one more time. Okay, so we'll close the hearing.
Close the record.
We'll close, close the record, thank you, Bill. And the board then will discuss.
May we discuss it separately? Is it two items as?
Yes, because that's how we're going
That's
to be
exactly
presented
what
to
I
us
would like to do.
separately.
I would exactly like to discuss this as if it's two
Okay.
different things.
Okay.
Do you want to begin, or do you want me to begin?
You go ahead.
Okay. I look at the 14 running feet as not a huge issue at all. But I want to make sure that the applicants know, and I know that we all know, we have to look at the lot, not the people who own them, and the people and how they might be. So saying that Catherine is having the lot next to Mark is great. That doesn't mean I'm against anything. I'm just letting you know that the Catherine and Mark lot, that it's no problem now because it's next door to Catherine. In a week, a month, a year, 4 years, 7 years, 12 years, it could be Mark and Joe Schmo or Susie and somebody. So we have to look at the lot because so many things that we decide follow the lot and follow with the property. So, and that's true for both the common boundary that they speak of with the slight infringement, the first variance, and also with the accessory building, which we're not talking about first. So if I were looking at this now, I would say that I can feel that I could support the side yard, the portion of the variance for the side yard with a stipulation that we're approving the 14 running feet of 8.4 inches only if the current house is relocated. So essentially, using Fred's wording earlier, that it pertains to the existing structure only. That's my feeling and my thought at this point, and I'd really like to hear what my fellow commissioners feel.
I'll go next. I fully agree with that. I want to say on the record, the rules here, I think we should be very reluctant, even for 8 inches, to vary them. I'm totally moved here by the idea that we're talking about an existing old historical structure that is going to be impinging, as opposed to some other applications we have here where somebody's building something new and doesn't like our rules. So to me, I think it is a extreme hardship to take off 8 inches, having rebuilt 4 houses myself, my wife and I did. So any sort of change like that presents extreme practical difficulties. But my reasoning to support a variance is based on the fact that it's an existing structure that they're not adding onto in order to causing the 8 inches, but the existing footprint of the house.
Mark, do you want to say anything?
I think it's very important to save these old houses whenever we have the opportunity to do so. But I'm reluctant ever to give a variance that may affect the future owner of this next door lot. Even though it's currently going to be in the family, 50 years from now it won't be. And that house will always be there 8 inches closer than would be permitted. I wish that Boardwalk Builders had taken a little more time to look into actually shortening that wall and giving us that option. It seems like we don't have that option, which is a shame, because that would be the ideal situation, is simply to shave off 8 inches if it's only a 14-foot section. That's only from me to Bill. It shouldn't be such a big building project when you're building a new foundation and you're turning the entire structure. I mean, you're doing the hard work. This seems to me like it would be the simple work, but that's what I feel, and I will pass it on to Jan.
Okay, I'm inclined to agree with Bill. If the old setbacks, which used to be 6 and 6, were still in practice, this wouldn't even be an issue. So here's a couple of things, though, that I would say, and I want to make sure that when we make a motion, we make it correctly, and that it isn't just the historical structure. if you're familiar with what just happened on Pennsylvania, we all thought, oh my God, they're preserving this beautiful house, right? The porch is gone, everything is gone. They stripped it down to the studs, literally, and are rebuilding the house. It is not going to be a historical house anymore. So I was very pleased to hear, what you plan to do. But having been in Rehoboth for 50 years, I'm a little distrustful of what people say at a meeting like this. So I was even more pleased to hear Glenn and Fred both say that we could put a contingency on this. But I want to make sure the contingency isn't just the house, because you might end up with a post and beam and a roof, which we've had on Oak, now in Pennsylvania. And so I don't know how to word it, but I don't have a really big problem with 7 or 8.25 inches.
And if I could, just to make it easier, I don't want there to be any, we don't have any objection to that either. This isn't a situation that we see in Rehoboth where people say they want to preserve a home to preserve nonconformities or FAR that's way over or whatever, and they preserve it by taking it down to the studs, and that's all that's left. There's not hardly any, except for the nails, there's not anything historical in it. So however
Right.
you word that, we're
Yeah,
fine with
and
that.
I'm not exactly sure how to word it, but I'm looking to my friend Fred here.
Well, I don't think we'll have much difficulty. We'll wait and see how the motion
Yeah.
is made,
Yeah.
and if anyone has any suggestions for improving it, we
Bef-
will.
before
But-
we make-
But the notion is that the motion would apply to the structure, and not generally to any improvements that don't exist at the current time or any future improvements. The relief would only apply to the structure as it's relocated on the
Right, right, and because we don't want to end up like we have on other streets where they're keeping the structure because it's usually larger than they could build today. And I don't think that's the intent here, and I would like to have our motion made so that we honor their request for the structure, for the main house, in such a way that we preserve it as they wish to.
And just a quick comment on the evidence that came in. The evidence that came in on the feasibility of removing any portion of the house, I think the preponderance of the evidence is that it's not feasible. That's for each individual member to judge, and it's be a horrible burden for an applicant to come in and demonstrate with any tremendous degree of precision what the cost factor would be. But the preponderance of the evidence anyway is that it's not a realistic option.
Before we get into a motion, Matt and Glenn, is there anything else that we should be considering at this point that we should be asking you folks when you've heard this presentation, and is there anything we're not considering about the house at this point? Because we're not talking about the accessory building yet.
No, I think the record's pretty full at
Okay.
this point.
Thank you.
Does anyone want to offer a motion?
I'll offer.
Not that I'm looking right
No,
at
that's
you,
all
Bill.
right, but you are. I will, I move that we approve the variance as to the house on the requirement that the variance is premised on the house remaining substantially as it currently exists in terms of the footprint, to address the issues that all the members have raised concerning a major alteration to the footprint.
Don't we have to, Bill, shouldn't we reference 270-26? Because that's the piece, the side yard that we're dealing with right now.
I think it's clear. I think it's clear that the motion relates to the side yard
That's fine.
setback.
And we said clearly that it's to the relocated house.
Yes.
Right.
Mhm, yes.
And I just have, could we add something? It's not just the structure. It's the historic nature, which is not just the structure itself, but the interior, or I don't know what to, but I just feel like, yeah, they turn structures all the time, but then nothing's left when they finish, you know, except, I'm sure Boardwalk has been involved with
Well,
those.
I don't think we should get too terribly specific, such that we put the building official in a difficult spot of whether he can approve or deny some kind of otherwise totally appropriate modification that they want to make. I think it's clear from the record that what we're talking about is the depth between one side of the house and the back of the house, which is current, or which is being relocated. So it's that depth along that 14-foot area that we're trying to accommodate and nothing else. No other structure.
No other structure, no, I think that was very clear. Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second that. I'll second that. I'm sorry, I wasn't close enough. Excuse me.
Any discussion?
Anything further?
Okay, I want to call for a vote. I'm going to have Bill
Okay.
vote first.
Yeah.
I vote in favor of the motion. I believe that the quick check standards have been met here. I believe that there are extreme practical difficulties in removing the 0.8 inches. In fact, I think from the quick check factors of preserving the historical nature in the area, that forcing a modification even to take off 8 or 10 inches would actually undercut what the goal is here of preserving these older homes. So I support the motion.
Okay, do I have a second? Evie seconded, right?
Yes,
think
I
you-
did.
you-
I seconded. I too support this motion for the house only, because I too believe that it's an exceptional practical difficulty structurally for the home to keep it without making the allowance for the 14 running feet at 8.4 inches. And I think that's enough.
I vote yes. As others have mentioned, I do think that saving the old house probably outweighs the reluctance I have in giving even an 8-inch variance. So I vote yes.
And the chair votes yes. I agree there's exceptional practical difficulties to try to obey the code in this case to preserve the historic house. So, the motion passes by 4-0 vote. Okay. Now we have the second variance request for the accessory building. Is there any comment on that?
Oh, sure. I guess my basic question is, and I'm going to ask Matt here, it seems to me that there might be a realm of, or a menu of possibilities here for that building. What they wish to do is leave it as is. That's the far end of the spectrum. Of course, the other end is to tear the whole thing down and to put it away. So what's in between those things? The things I came up with, and I'm asking you if these make sense, and go ahead.
Well,
ahead.
our record is closed on evidence, so
Oh.
I would like, the opportunity to ask questions.
Oh, I didn't realize I couldn't ask Matt at this point.
Well,
That's okay.
well, if you're going to ask him to speculate on something, if you want him to clarify something that
okay.
was said.
Then that's my error. All right, well then, but I can speak about what I'm thinking, correct? But not, okay, I'm sorry, Matt. I didn't know, I learn every time. So it seems like they could remove that building and, or change it so that it meets the current code. No matter how anybody clarifies it or classifies it, that it would be 4 feet from the back, and it would be X feet from the side, and it would meet the current building code criteria.
You're saying if it was moved.
Well, it would have to be moved to meet the current building code. But I don't know if it's grandfathered, or what it means if, and I can't ask you this, I'm sorry.
No,
If
well,
I'd have
that
known,
would
I
be-
would have asked him that earlier, because I had it on my list, but I thought we were doing, anyway, that's my error. So if it's grandfathered as the way it is exactly, then that's one whole thing that binds us a bit.
Can I answer that
I think you
question?
might be able to.
May I ask you that? Is
not
that building, the way it exists today, grandfathered?
It's not.
It is a legal non-conforming structure, but for the improvements, the water heater, the shower that was created there.
Wait a minute, I don't think that's accurate. I'm sorry, I've been around here a long time. It is it's legal and non-conforming as long as nothing is done to the property. But when you partition a property, then all legal non-conformings have to be removed. And that's why I believe they're here for a variance, for the house, but also for the accessory building. I do not believe that once they partition that lot, that accessory building is legal, is not grandfathered.
Not correct.
So the general rule, as I've understood it, is that in the partitioning process, if there's a legal nonconformity, well, let's talk about a lot that has, so for example, if you have a double lot and a building crosses the middle property line, and then say there is an accessory structure such as this one that is closer than 4 feet to the rear property line, the partitioning would require that the house that traverses the middle property line be removed, because once you put the property line, once you create a property line in the middle, you'd be creating a nonconformity because the house would be sitting within now the side setbacks. So long as the accessory structure on this lot is, the encroachment is not increased, it can remain. So if you are increasing a nonconformity by partitioning, then that nonconforming structure has to be removed and brought into compliance. But if there's no new encroachments created and you're not intensifying an existing encroachment, it can remain. So in this instance, my understanding is that it would be able to remain as a legally nonconforming structure.
But for the change in use.
Right, here, because the city's records reflect that a garage was approved and built, and there's no reflection in the city records that the shower and the water tank servicing the shower were approved. That is something that creates this issue needing to be legalized.
And the record seems to suggest that those improvements have been there since at least 1970, I think.
Can I ask a question following up on what the solicitor just said? They are creating a new boundary to one side of the existing carriage house. And looking at the map, it protrudes even more than the house does. So if the carriage house has to be 10 feet from the new property line, then doesn't your comment earlier that just what the example you gave, which is you create by the partition, it looks to me like the existing carriage house is going to be 8 feet from the new line. So is that Jan's point that if you are partitioning and creating a new nonconformity, that you would in fact have to get a variance?
That's a very interesting question in that you're right. We'll be creating a new side yard for it. And my dimension I can't see. Is it about 8 feet? It looks like you've got 10 feet.
Well, if you
or
go
9.3.
to the
It's 6.8, isn't it?
6.8 feet from the boundary line,
Okay.
Len,
So
on a working version.
So you have 6.8 on the one side, then you have 18.6 on the other side.
Yeah.
So if you were looking at just that structure and just the side yards, that would be compliant with existing side yard setbacks because you have to have an aggregate
Aggregate.
of 16 feet with nothing shorter than 6 feet. So here you'd have,
But I thought an accessory structure could be close to 4 feet on a side.
4 feet, as accessory, but they're creating a new lot.
No,
So
know,
I don't
so
know,
it's
it's
still
4 feet and 4 feet is my understanding.
Yeah, so it'd be
That's right.
4 feet off the new line, and it's 6.
No, this would definitely be more than 4 feet.
have to be closer than 4 feet to.
Yeah, this is definitely more than 4 feet.
So the new line may
backside.
not be aggravating the non-conformity.
But has the definition of the building already been invalidated by the improvements to it?
That was in the
Yeah, I
50s.
guess my judgment is there's nothing in the record that says that that the shower was put in, at a point in time where it wasn't legal. It sounds to me that there was at least a question about it, and I don't know whether, since we have evidence in the record from 2 of the Wagners that the shower was there in 1970. I haven't been here for 50 years, though sometimes it feels that way. I don't know when the rules went in on grandfathering, but I know a lot of them went in after 1970. So my view is that there is no evidence in the record that when the shower was put in, it required approval. And I guess if somebody could answer the question whether if there's factual evidence in the record that it existed in 1970.
But they're saying here, Bill, that in 2008, the city, the structure was the structure was identified then as a one-car garage in 2008, which would imply that it did not have.
No, but
that's
that's not what the facts in the record are.
Right.
The facts in the record, because we took testimony, the only facts in the record that have been sworn to is that the shower existed in 1970. So, the city can say whatever they want to say, but the only facts in the record that we heard is that, from 2 people, is that they took showers there in 1970, and I believe that at least one, if not both of the Wagners testified it hasn't changed, that the head came from the Henlopen Hotel, whatever that was, and that they have not actually changed the piping in it for 53 years. I can't get anything in Rehoboth to last 20 years, let alone 53, so you tell me how you do that.
Mark, do you have any?
I believe that it's been there as long as the house, and I believe the shower's been there as long as the garage has been there. And I believe this probably is or should be grandfathered. So I would have no objection in letting the building stay.
Okay. Edie, do you have any more you want to say?
I just feel like I don't know enough. That's the way I feel right now. I don't know enough about it.
Well, I guess
I
what
don't know how
what
to
I would
get
say
more.
about grandfathering is, many, many years ago, I took a planning course for planning commission members with Max Walton. And one of the things that he talked about was, even though we grandfather things in, eventually over time, and the time could be 50, 100 years or so, most everything comes up to code. Glenn is shaking his hand, or his head. So that is what we were told. So now we have a new lot being made. And there are going to be 2 houses where there was one. We're going to preserve the trees. We're going to preserve the old house. But the grandfathering of this accessory structure, I don't think should remain, because I have to agree with Max. Over time, all the grandfathering gets removed as people rebuild and stuff. So I would not support.
Can I make a statement, though, Mr. Townsend? Just for the record, procedurally, we haven't even gotten to the non-conforming use aspect of it.
I'm not talking about non-conforming use.
That's
I'm
what
just talking.
grandfathering is. That's what
Okay,
grandfathering.
so
I mean,
No,
you're saying we
grandfathering
don't-
is also a building.
Oh, wait, let me just make a statement. We've talked about the variance and the standards for that. You said there's not evidence as to legal non-conformity or grandfathering. That's because we haven't had a chance to present it yet. The conversation I had with Mr. Townsend was we would go through the variances and only get to the legal nonconformity if you didn't grant the variance and clear it up that way. So I don't want there to be any misunderstanding. We haven't made a record. It's because we haven't made a record. We didn't get a chance to yet. That was part of our application.
Right, so we did have a conversation. The notion is that, and I think it was stated early on that we were going to hear these variance applications first, and if necessary, we would hear the appeal. The appeal portion of the matter, if it came to that, would relate to whether the property was grandfathered or legal nonconforming and could stay, and which is a legal argument, as opposed to an area variance argument as to the, whether this structure in its current location significantly impacts neighboring properties, and whether the applicant is confronted with an exceptional practical difficulty if required to bring that structure into compliance.
Okay, and I apologize for not understanding the difference.
No, it's.
I'm not a lawyer,
I
obviously.
I think the fact that it's been there a long time probably fits into both, the analysis of both. But you don't have to make the determination as to whether or not it is legal nonconforming or grandfathered as part of the application for the variance. So we're gonna get a motion and a second, presumably, to either approve or deny the variance, in which you're going to apply the quick check factors to the question of whether the applicant has an exceptional practical difficulty of ownership presented by the location of the shed, or
All right.
or whatever you want to call it.
So can I ask you a question then? If he's already having a house moved, why can't he pick up the shed and move it 4 feet?
Well, that's not a legal question. I mean, that's a
Oh, that's
factual question that I can't answer.
Okay.
That's a question that could have been put to the applicant
Okay.
as to what the challenge would have been to move it.
Well, I've moved an accessory structure. It's a big challenge. We had to duct tape it together, but it made it.
So your experience and common sense suggests that a structure of this vintage might not be easily moved from its current location.
But the city makes you do it.
So I'm sorry. So would it be a possibility to reject the variance and then approve the grandfathering
Yeah, that's theoretically possible.
option? Okay.
That's I'm not suggesting or suggesting that that's right or wrong, but that could happen. You
possibility,
could
right.
come to a conclusion that the applicant has not met the test for an area variance, and at which time we're going to hear more from the applicant as to whether the property or whether the structure should be considered legal nonconforming, and perhaps we'll hear more from the city as well.
Well, I'm willing to make a motion, at least to
Okay.
get something on the table for us
All
to,
right.
to go for. I'd like to make a motion on the accessory building 27-44 to deny the variance. And my reasoning is I don't think that it creates an exceptional practical difficulty for the owners for this entire project. I believe that there are other options for solution for that particular building.
I would second that.
Any comments, Bill, on this?
No comments.
Okay, no comments. All right, I'll call for,
From you, anything?
no.
Okay, all right,
I'm
you want to call the question?
I'm
You
going to
wanna
call the question.
Start with Ms.
Edie?
Herron.
Oh, I gave my reasoning already. I don't believe it creates a exceptional practical difficulty to deal with that particular building in another manner. So I vote for the motion to deny.
Mark?
And I also vote for a motion to deny, as I feel that grandfathering would be a better solution.
And I vote for a motion to deny also, because I don't think it makes an exceptional practical difficulty. Thank you.
And
Bill?
we need to
Bill,
hear from
no.
Bill, but we're going to, before we go to Bill, can you give us something more than it doesn't meet the test? Like, what is it that you don't think it is, that it falls short on?
Well, I think it falls short I don't think it's an exceptional practical difficulty to remove it. To remove it, absolutely. I don't think it belongs there. I think we've created a new lot essentially, we're giving a variance for the house, which is crucial, I think. But I don't think that the accessory structure is crucial to preserving the historical nature of the house. And I, you know, I don't think that I don't think it's in keeping with the character and the use of the immediate vicinity.
I oppose the motion. I would grant the variance. I think it meets all four of the quick check factors. They're not proposing to change anything. As I understand the discussion that we had in my question a few minutes ago, the creation of the partition does not create a need for a variance here because it is more than 4 feet from the new partition line. I think there is a hardship and extreme practical difficulties to move a structure of that vintage. And I don't think, respectfully, that telling them to take it down is frankly, I don't think it's a proper response to the variance request. If they were proposing to move it, then I understand that, but they're not. They're frankly not proposing to make any change. So I'm voting against the motion and would grant the variance request.
Now you can declare
That the motion has passed.
motion is passed to
The
deny
motion has passed with 3 to 1
the variance.
to
3
deny
1.
the variance.
Okay, so now I think we move on to the third leg of the stool.
Right. This will hopefully be a lot shorter than the first 2 legs of the stool. So we heard a lot of information about the nature of that garage accessory structure. You've seen the pictures of it. We've heard testimony that that it's been there since the 1970s. We've heard from Mr. Janis, who said that in fact, but for the shower and the hot water heater, which he's not familiar with, it would be legally non-conforming. So if we didn't have to deal with the shower and a hot water heater, we would not be in front of you all this evening at all. That's the official position of the city's building inspector. So with that, I'd like to call Mr. Wagner back up, if you would. I'm going to ask you a few questions, so if you could go to the microphone. Not to completely belabor the point, you have to give your name. I don't guess you have to be sworn.
This is
Yeah.
Mark Wagner. Do I
Yeah,
need
you-
to swear in again?
You remain having affirmed your oath.
So is it your testimony that that shower with hot water has been there since at least 1970?
That is correct, and I can say something further about it, which was that it was there when we bought the house. And I can also say that what I know about the provenance of the home, if you go in the basement currently, there's dog sheds from when they used it as a hunting lodge. So they had a larger shed for the dogs, and then they had a separate shed for, and these are not, I always thought they were coal bins when I first saw them, but someone that we got from the Lewis Historical Society to come down and explain to us what was going on down there. They were, excuse my language, but if there was a bitch that was in heat, she would be put in a separate kennel to be separated from the other dogs. So there's these 2 things there. In addition, there's a shower in the basement that was used for the servants. And this is 1920s, so there you go. And at another point, the outside shower was also where the servants would clean the stuff that was caught from the hunting. And so it's been there since 1926. There's an existing French drain that's there, as was pointed out in the previous testimony. All the tongue and groove paneling, all the fixtures match what's in the house. It was there. I can also say that Jim Hudson, who was our plumber when we bought the house, he can testify to the fact that it was there. And he's still extant. And as far as the hot water heater is concerned, there was a hot water heater, and we've replaced it several times. So that's all we've done in terms of like the hot water heater. And that's, I don't know when it was installed initially, but prior to our having purchased the house. And that's to the best of my recollection, which in 1970, I was 13.
Did you buy the shower head from the Henlopen Hotel?
I certainly did, as well as some glasses that we still have in the home.
All right. Thanks. Thanks, Mark. There may be some more questions that you might have, that the board might have.
I have a question for
Well,
Matt.
let me, just real quick.
Because something you said at the beginning. You
Okay.
said the building inspector.
The mic.
I'm sorry, you said at the beginning of your presentation that the building inspector has ruled if the shower wasn't there, okay, then it would be a legally non-conforming structure, and it wouldn't be and that the property could be partitioned, and that could stay exactly where it was? Is that what you said?
No.
I ask that too.
So you asked a two-part question. He said earlier, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Matt, but that it was his opinion that this was a legally non-conforming structure, but for that garage. I want to get into part two of that in anticipation of this.
Let's define that.
Well, let me go forward. You all have focused on the partition and whether that impacts the legal nonconformity. That's what grandfather means, legal nonconformity of the structure as a result of the partition. Mr. Mandela's talked about that a little bit, but I want to play that out for you, and I'm going to give you exhibits that show this. As I mentioned before, we kind of glossed over it, but it's important apparently now. The city, as Mr. Mandela said, as long as you don't encroach over the boundary line, the legal nonconformity is not impacted by a partition. And you don't have to take my word for it. I see Ms. Connolly shaking her head. This is a city stamped a survey that was approved by the city by Matt in November 23 of 2020. And this is, and I'm going to hand it to you, it's tax map 334-20.05. It's parcels 154 and part of 153. And you can see a shed right there that...
But isn't that consistent with what we're hearing now, but for the existence of the shower, that structure is legal non-conforming and would not need to be removed despite the fact that there's a partition?
Well, I think there are two things. One is, and I would ask Matt this, when you do inspections, do you go typically and look at what's inside of an accessory structure when you determine if it's non-conforming?
Well,
To determine use, I would take a look at the interior features, not necessarily what was stored inside.
Okay. Second thing is, does the installation of a hot water heater in a residential home trigger a building permit? The replacement, I should say, that's a better question. A replacement of a hot water heater trigger a new building permit through your office?
Typically, no.
I was gonna say, right, everybody here was holding their breath. All right. So the testimony that Mr. Wagner gave that hot water heater has been in use, or a hot water heater has been in use and has been replaced several times over years, might have occurred without your office knowing about it. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Robertson, I don't really care about the hot water heater or the shower. My problem is the building, and Mr. Janus may have said in 2020, but I was on the Planning Commission for a long time, and we never partitioned a lot that had a non-conforming
I
structure
can
on it.
tell you right here that the city,
I know, the city changed their policy or changed their code in 2020? No, I believe you. I believe you, they did it. But what I'm asking you is, did the city change in 2020? Well, they did administrative variances before, after, I don't know what point they started doing administrative, but prior to that, they all had to come to the Planning Commission. And Matt wasn't the building inspector. But Glenn was the attorney.
Jan, won't this come up again when they go for their petitioning?
Not if we've given them a variance for it, Mark.
well, you
Then-
haven't given
well,
us a variance.
the variance was denied. So the next question is whether that's a legal non-conforming.
But is that our question
Yes,
to
that's,
solve?
the city has made a determination that that is not legally non-conforming because of the change of use, and that decision has been appealed from by Mr. Robertson, and this is an opportunity for Mr. Robertson to make his case as to why that property is legal, or that structure is legally, should be considered legal non-conforming and should not have to be removed.
Because
So-
we denied the variance. Had we
approved the,
approved the variance, we would not have gotten to this
we
point.
wouldn't have to
Yeah,
be
an
entertaining this
alternative,
legal
right.
question, yes.
Entertain the right word?
It's a fair point. Belabored this question.
So, well, where are we now?
Okay.
You have more to say, I think.
Not really. I mean, at this point, we've established, I think, based on the preponderance of the evidence, that that shower has been there since 1926. We've heard statements that the structure is legally non-conforming, but for the shower, we've heard statements from members of the board that the shower doesn't matter, it's still legally non-conforming. Then we've heard statements that creating the new lot line somehow undermines the legal non-conforming status of it, which you have proof based on the city stamp that it does not. I mean, it's pretty much as
So
succinct as
it's
that.
essentially a conflict between the fact that in all of my dealings with the city over the years, but Matt is saying that the city has changed their mind.
No, I don't think
And
that's saying
now
that
it's a
at all.
legally non-conforming structure, even though the lot is being partitioned. I don't, it's this,
I think, Ms. Connolly, with all due respect, you're taking information that's outside the record at this point.
all right, so what do I say?
Well, what we're going to get to, and it's going to be a little bit of a challenge, but eventually you're going to have a legal question to decide. And I think we're going to need to hear from the city a little bit more on this as well. And you may have some follow-up questions from Mr. Robertson. The question is it legal non-conforming? Or is it not legal non-conforming? I think because of the assertion that the city has made that there have been some modifications to the structure. That's a legal question, and I do agree that you may have had some experiences which are factual in nature, which are not part of this record. So we need to restrict our consideration to the legal arguments that are being made, and we haven't really heard, I don't think we've heard much from the city yet. And I want to make sure that Mr. Robertson has had a chance. So you've entered this document into the record on the appeal, which is
Is that the Stokely Street?
which is the Stokely Street
It's actually
example.
page 2, which is more relevant, because the one you see on page 1 was torn down, a new house was built. On page 2, that was the existing structures in the shed, and all that's there today if you drive by it. And it was approved and stamped, you can see the stamp on it.
So what, is it relevant? So let's say for the sake.
Is this correct? Is this 7.5 feet from the property line? 7.5, is that?
So this
Yeah,
is
that's-
Stokely Street.
No, this is the rear property line.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
but
saying
look, it's right on the
7.5.
side.
Yeah, but.
It's on the
okay,
side.
But the rear, it's back.
Line to be,
No, here.
yeah, the
right
line
here.
to, yeah, but the line to be recreated is right on the
Yeah,
line.
but-
So that's the nonconformity there,
Okay,
not
the side,
there.
not the rear, the side.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fred, can I just clear this up in my mind, so that if we agree with Mr. Wagner, as I do, that shower has been there all of those years, and then Matt was mistaken in calling it a new addition or a modification, then the case is sort of closed, that we could vote that without any further discussion. Is that right?
Well, we haven't really even heard from the city yet. And I don't know that we have to hear a whole lot, but we do need to hear from them at how they came to that conclusion and how the law applies in that fact.
Can we hear
factual
that then
scenario.
and move things along?
We'll allow Mr. Robertson to respond.
I mean, I'm fine with hearing from what Mr. Mandelis might argue, or Mr. Janis, I don't know who's going to.
Sure, I'm happy to address it, and thanks for the opportunity. So clearly, the historical record here is a little bit fuzzy. We know that the city did approve a garage structure. The original approval does not demonstrate that there was a shower at that time or a hot water tank. So it exists where, the building exists where it exists. And at some point, the city passed zoning laws, including setbacks, rear setbacks in this instance, that moved the structure from being approved and legal to now legal because it was approved at some point in that location, but non-conforming with the new zoning setbacks. So the structure would be allowed to remain, but for the addition at some point of the shower, and the hot water tank. And that goes to section 270-49 in the code, and this is in a section of the code that addresses nonconformities. So 270-49 says repairs, residing, and internal alterations. Here we had an internal alteration, including structural, may be made in any structure or part thereof, which is devoted to a nonconforming use or which was erected in a nonconforming manner. This one is now sitting in a nonconforming manner, provided that a special exception must be secured if the existing nonconforming use is being changed to a different nonconforming use, or the existing nonconforming area within the structures to be increased. So the proper way to have added that shower to this building would have been to come before this board and ask for a special exception, and if you had granted it, then it would be allowed to remain. So the addition of the shower and the hot water tank is what calls into question whether this is actually legally nonconforming. Our view has been that it's a tight call, honestly, but it's a tight enough call that we wanted you to have the opportunity to make a decision on it. I mean, in conversations I had with Mr. Robertson, we have kind of viewed this as a house clean it up because we're not sure exactly whether it's legally nonconforming or whether a variance should be granted or not granted. And that's really why it's before you here. But the basis of the city's position is 270-49, where the internal alteration of a shower was made that was not permitted by the city. Like issued a permit, not prohibited, but there's no permit issue.
And we don't really need to know, Glenn, when it was done. What we've heard from our appellants is that it at least was there in 1970 when they purchased the property. And so it's sometime between when the Clydes had it built and the Wagner's family purchased it, some alteration was made. So we accept that so now you're saying, so what are we going to do about it?
Right.
Is that right?
I think that's
Okay.
essentially correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
But do we know that when it was done, it violated the zoning rules? Since, I certainly asked Matt, in 1970, do we know what the zoning rules were on these sort of structures?
We don't. I can certainly go back and look into the requirements at that time, but I did not do that as part of this report.
Can I ask a question too, for Matt or record? Do we know when, and I used to know when it was, and I want to say it was the 50s. Do we know when zoning started? Because there wasn't zoning in
48,
1920s.
I think.
What was it?
I think it was 48.
Yeah.
Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, I couldn't recall specifically, thanks. One point, and I don't disagree with what Mr. Mandela said, and he certainly represented in our conversations, that this whole thing was a desire to clean everything up. We didn't think we'd be here for 2 hours cleaning it up, but I appreciate his distinction where he said it was not permitted, which means somehow it's in violation versus they don't have any record of a building permit being pulled for it, because there's a big distinction between that, I think. The other thing is, I know Mr. Janis supplied you all with surveys, and one was 2000, well, they're both 2008, although one of them is a placement survey that looks well older than that. The 2008 date's the date it was received. It looks like an old Wingate-Neschenbach survey from I'm not sure when, and I can't read the date, except for it looks like there's a 19-something date on it. Those were submitted to planning and zoning just as placement surveys. They weren't submitted as part of a building permit or any application or approval or inspection. So I don't think you can take these and read from them that it said one-car garage. That means the city went out and inspected and it was a one-car garage. They just stamped that they'd received a survey. So I just don't want to have that lost in the whole equation. So thanks, Mr. Mendelis. I appreciate that explanation too.
So is it okay if I then the city no longer considers having a non-conforming property at the property line? They don't consider that to be a...
So we just went over the code and
Right,
what it
I
says.
saw that. But my question, Fred, is that, so I think everyone up here agrees that the hot water heater was there probably, in 1970, maybe even in 1926, I don't know. But it's been there a long time. I don't think there's any disagreement on that. But then if we say that, okay, that we are going to override the building inspector and say we agree that the hot water heater was there, does it also mean that we agree with the building inspector that one doesn't have to bring the accessory building into compliance?
I think the the statement that was made was if the nonconformity is not aggravated by the partitioning of the 100-foot lot to a 50-foot lot, then that structure is considered legally nonconforming and may remain in its then current,
But still has to be counted as part of the FAR.
which is a separate issue.
And it
altogether.
doesn't matter the impact on the neighbors who have tried to address this issue with the previous owner and
well,
got no,
The significance of the testimony we heard from the neighbors was that the location of that structure in the context of a variance application did significantly impact their property.
right, and that they asked that it
But
be.
that is not a factor in the appeal from the decision of the building official that this, what was at least at one point legal nonconforming has lost its status. That's the question.
Well, I mean, I can't lie. I mean, I believe they had a hot water heater. I mean, I believe they had a shower. So I can't lie because I think it should come down or be moved to be compliant. I can't lie about it. I'm sorry.
Will some of this come back up? I mean, let's say that we decide it's not legal nonconforming, that we deny the appeal. Let's say we do that. Then are the Wagners, once they have made all the changes that are in front of them to make, do they come back then going through Matt again with their building ideas and their, if they haven't taken this down yet? I mean, do they come, I mean, I don't know.
You want to take a stab at that?
Just to be clear.
Thanks, Glenn, I appreciate your time.
My understanding from the building official at this point, and maybe you should testify to this, or maybe I should ask you the question, and the question is, if the current owners were to remove the shower and hot water tank, would the structure be allowed to remain?
Yeah.
I believe the structure could remain because it was placed and has been placed for a multitude of years.
So it's essentially, you're saying it's grandfathered?
Correct.
Yeah. If they remove that and deal with their shower issues in a different way as they go through these.
So that starts to get into this issue of whether they have an exceptional practical difficulty or not. Like
Right.
whether they should be able, but we're beyond that question, and now we're on this question of
The
whether.
only question we have is the shower, has it been there as long as the building or longer? And it appears that we all agree that it has.
And does the law suggest that the installation of that shower change the character of that structure such that it loses its legal nonconforming status?
We don't even know when that is. It could have been 1932.
Well,
Sure, it wasn't new when Mr. Wagner was taking showers there, so.
if the servants were using it.
Are we ready for a vote?
Well, is
I
there
think we're
anything
ready.
more from anyone? Do we want to, anybody want to sum up or anything, Vince?
No, I think it's been said enough.
Okay, all right. So
Matt,
it seems we're ready.
Matt, have we asked you everything we should have asked you about this? I mean, I'm sorry, I know that's an open-ended question, but is there anything else that has walked through your experience with all this, or that you can share that
I believe you have thoroughly grilled all applicants at this point.
we're ready to pull our hair out, huh?
Thank you, Matt, on behalf of all of us.
Does anyone want to make a motion?
No one else, I would make the motion that we approve this building as being a,
Well,
Okay.
we're overturning a building inspector's decision.
I'm sorry?
We're overturning a building inspector's decision.
If that's the motion.
I didn't get to it yet.
Right. Yeah, he might be doing okay.
I was basically going to suggest that we overturn the building department's decision that it is indeed a grandfathered non-conforming use. Have it all in there, Jan?
Shower. It's the hot water heater and shower that we're overturning. Not the building, the hot water heater and shower.
Okay,
All
so,
right, then that's all you need, we'll make it just a shower then.
well, so the motion,
Building.
the motion is that the decision to say strip, under these circumstances, the garage structure from its legal nonconforming status due to the presence of the shower is being overturned, right? Is that?
Yeah, and I just want to make one point that, in fairness to Matt, this is an appeal, but it's not really an appeal. I think that Mr. Mendelis said it well, and I'll probably butcher it, but we really didn't have any clear idea on this structure. And so he wasn't comfortable saying it was legally nonconforming before we developed all the facts on it. So we collectively said, let's go to you all, make a record, and that way everybody understands what it is. Now he's heard all the facts, he's made his statement to you all. But I would like it to cover the structure so that going forward, everybody knows what we're talking about, not just the shower, the removal of the shower.
But if we do this, this can exist ad infinitum, right?
Well, if we hadn't done anything, it would exist ad infinitum. It's
Well-
been there a century at this point, so.
Well, you don't know what happened when you got to the planning commission, so if we didn't do this, I'm just,
So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second.
Mark? Call for a
Well,
vote.
do you have anybody have anything else they want to add before we vote, or are we ready to vote? Not.
No, he doesn't get to add, only us.
I didn't know if public comment was an option or not.
Oh, that is true. That is true. Thank you. So we have public in the audience on the question of the appeal only.
Why don't you get near the mic, because it's not going to, you're not near the mic. It's not gonna-
Oh, okay.
Great, but.
Right, yeah. I look
comfortable
comfortable,
back
but
there.
I'm not comfortable. Okay, just for the record, thank you, Mr. Janis, for pointing that out. But public hearings involving variances clearly allow for the public to participate and be heard, particularly since it relates to the question of whether their properties might be significantly impacted. But it has been determined that the public has a right to be heard on legal questions that are come up during appeals from determinations from the building official. So I should open up the floor and ask you if either of the two of you, O'Donnell, is that right, wish to be heard on the legal question only? Not, you do? Okay. All right. Yeah.
I would preface my remarks with, this has been an astounding hearing. You had the hearing, you had the evidence, you had the vote, and suddenly council is allowed to intervene in the middle of your proceedings and turn it around. That's not how it works in the real world. Maybe in Rehoboth, but I object strenuously, and note for the record, you broke the procedures that allowed, the council doesn't come in when you're deliberating.
So we've had a motion and deliberation on the variances, and then we had to have a second set of considerations, and that involved the question of the appeal.
Well, that was a seamless change. You voted, and that was the end of it, and suddenly it wasn't the end of it.
No, that's I understand the confusion. The application is two-part. The application was for two variances, and then the application was in the event that the variance related to the shed were to be denied, that the applicant had reserved an appeal, which is within the jurisdiction of the building or within the Board of Adjustment to grant or deny appeals from determinations made by the building official or by the city over the application of the zoning code to matters involving property owners. So it's not the most common area of jurisdiction that we have, but it is well within our jurisdiction to hear appeals.
My only other statement would be, presuming that indeed it is a non-conforming use, and then it turns around and it isn't. When does that get changed? I mean, why does that make a difference? If it is a non-conforming use, the board has the authority to say, that doesn't mean we have to grant a variance. Why does that suddenly give it the status of getting an automatic?
We've turned down the variance.
Yeah, the variances were denied.
Variance is done. A separate right of appeal. So basically we had three issues. We granted the variance on the house. We denied the variance on the shed. A separate issue is whether is an appeal from the decision of the building inspector that this is not a legal non-conforming use. If they had done nothing, if they had just left the house where it is, they didn't need further permission to keep the structure, put aside the shower issue. Legal non-conforming is in the code, and what it means is it's non-conforming with the current zoning, but it was legal when it was done, because otherwise every house that was built with 0.7 FAR would have to be taken down. Everyone's house in town that during that time period when FAR was 0.7 built 3,500 square foot houses. Those are not legal today, except for the fact that they're legal non-conforming, because when they were built, they were legal. The zoning was changed. But that's what legal non-conforming means, which is it was legal when it was done, but it no longer conforms with a change in the zoning. So that's what the issue here is the building inspector's judgment that this doesn't meet the requirements of legal non-conforming because of the shower. They can appeal from that decision. It's not a variance. It's a legal overruling of the building inspector on his decision that this doesn't meet the requirements for a legal non-conforming.
Okay.
But-
So the long and short of it is, they didn't have to apply for a variance at all.
What they did is they applied for, in the alternative. If you go back to the agenda that Ms. Womack sent out, it said they're applying for a variance or, in the alternative, an appeal of the building inspector's view. So that was always in front of us, and we understood that, so that's why we went from the denial of the variance to a hearing on the appeal. And I understand why somebody who isn't familiar with all of our procedures would say, aren't they doing the same issue again?
Yeah, I didn't get this
Understood.
distinction. I've taken up more of your time.
No,
on
no,
this.
but we want to make sure that people
I
understand.
will say the thing that's so confusing in it is, to me,
Thank
is the legally non-conforming. Because in my history in Rehoboth, anytime a lot was partitioned, you had to be conforming. And that, I think, maybe that's where my mistake, my confusion is, because I have never heard until Mr. Robertson pointed out that in 2020, you could leave a shed right up against the property line when you partitioned your lot. You couldn't do that in the past.
So the testimony from the city on that point is if the proposed lot line or the reinstatement of the plotted lot line between two 50-foot lots doesn't result in the aggravation of a non-conforming structure, then it doesn't interfere with it. And one of the difficulties we have, if you were relying just on your experiences over the years and not placing sufficient weight on what you hear that's placed in the record, you might not have picked up or recalled or even understood in the first place that some of those structures were violating the setbacks as they related to the new proposed lot line. So
No, I'm very aware of that, Fred. I spent a lot of time on the Planning Commission, as Mr. Robertson knows, and I'm very much aware of 4-foot, non-conforming. There was actually one on Park Avenue that we did for that same reason. So I think that interpretation when subdividing a lot, partitioning went from the Planning Commission to an administrative, I think things changed, and but I don't think the code changed. But whatever, I'm sitting here now, faced with a different situation, and I agree that there's a heater in there, that the shower was in there. I don't agree that that the property is grandfathered. That's my personal opinion. But that's not what I get to vote on. right?
What do we have? We've got a motion.
Got a motion?
And a second, which, if it gets 3 votes, it will reverse the decision or not uphold the decision of the building official that the structure that is housing that shower is no longer legally non-conforming. That's the building official's position. If the motion's granted, you would conclude that the structure housing the shower is legal non-conforming and does not need to be removed.
Okay, I can't even remember. Did you make the motion, Bill?
Motion.
Marked
Nobody-
it.
I don't believe it's been seconded.
Yeah.
Bill, I remember
second
one of you got seconded,
And
okay.
I'll second it.
All right. I typically would not vote first, but I am this time, and I'm abstaining. So, Mark?
I vote yes. There's so many double negatives. I vote in agreement with the motion.
Edie? Why? Oh, no, Bill.
Do we
Bill?
have to say why for this too?
I would like to hear.
For all the reasons we spoke of in the last 2 hours, because I believe that the partitioning by placement of a shower is insignificant in this case and probably took place prior to zoning codes and should not be relevant. Therefore, the shed or garage, whatever you want to call it, would be grandfathered as a legal non-conforming use. That's my reasoning.
I vote against the motion. I believe that it's still, it's not legal non-conforming. It's no longer legal non-conforming because of the shower and the hot water heater or hot water tank. We are, from what I have understood as have been part of this group, we are not tied to precedent. So although precedent is interesting, we have to take each case exactly as we see it. So I vote against.
Am I the only one?
No.
Bill has to vote.
I vote in favor. I believe that the only evidence in the record is that this is a legal nonconforming. There is nothing about the partition that actually addresses, that actually makes the current use go from legal nonconforming to not legal nonconforming. So I don't understand, frankly, your comment either, because it isn't the partition that is making this legal, not legal nonconforming. In fact, as I understand it, if it is not a legal nonconforming, even if they don't partition, the building inspector can require them to remove it because, in his view, so I believe that there is nothing about the granting of the first variance that changes the character of this, and the only evidence in the record that so far is that it is legal nonconforming.
Okay, I'm going to change my vote from abstaining to no, because I don't believe it's legal and nonconforming.
Because of the existence of the shower.
Because of the existence of the shower. The vote fails,
So
it's
there you
2
have
to
it.
2.
So it's 2 to 2. The motion failed. I presume there's no other motion to be made. I don't know that. Would it make sense to?
If I could offer, the only other thing that we probably still need clarity on is, if the shower, he stated on the record that if the shower and the hot water tank are removed, the structure could remain. And if you need to rule on that, you can. If not, that's the position that he's taken, and that's where things will sit.
Yeah, well, I think that's evident from what we discussed, that it's the presence of the modifications that of course, I say we discussed, we did discuss it, and it's obvious that that was the reason why the motion to find the structure with its current use legal failed, and that's because of the presence of the shower. And the question was asked, would the structure itself be allowed to remain if it was brought back into, I guess, its legal non-compliant state? And the answer was yes. So I don't think there's anything that we've done or not done up here today which would interfere with that position if the building inspector were to take it. So if we were to move to deny the application, I presume the votes would be 2-2. Is that fair to say?
To deny the application to?
To deny.
Wait a minute.
So we have a motion, we had a motion to approve the appeal or to overturn the decision of the building official. That failed 2-2.
Right.
So if we were to have a motion to deny the appeal, I presume that motion would fail 2-2, right?
To deny
Is that
what?
logical?
I don't understand your
I don't understand it. We're
Maybe
missing your
this is a
point.
legal question. then.
Nobody would change their votes, basically.
I don't understand. I don't
Okay.
understand.
So no one's changing their vote. That's another way to ask it.
Okay,
No one's changing their,
their
okay,
vote.
very good. All right, well, I think that's all the business that we can do.
We change each other's mind in discussion, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, it relates to the nature of a failed vote. Like, a failed motion is a non-action, and the applicant is entitled to an action, but we could stay here all day.
I see your question now. If we reverse the language.
If we reversed it
the
and,
language says-
and
made
moved
it
to
yes or
uphold the building official, we would still be 2-2.
Yes.
We couldn't advance the ball
I
any
see
further.
what you're saying.
We don't
Yes.
feel the opposite.
I get it.
yeah.
I get it.
All right.
And do we have any applications other than the already one on the April agenda? The one that's already there? We have 3 applications for April,
Including?
including,
So we just have 3.
we have 3. Okay, are they more than one hotel?
We can have that conversation
Okay,
offline.
all right. Could I get what,
Go ahead.
Fred, is there anything,
I don't
you
know,
wanna bring
is
to
there
the-
anything left on the agenda?
No, I don't think so. I think we've gone through the
No
agenda.
other business?
No.
So motion to adjourn?
Motion to
Yes,
adjourn.
motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in
Yeah.
favor?
Thank you all for your time and concern of Rehoboth Beach.